Hey everybody, I'm Susan. This is Nicole. You will recognize our faces from like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
when
lots
we
of content.
sat with you for hours and hours and hours and taught you how to set up your Tave. If you're watching this live and you did not get to see anything that we did during the Ultimate Tave Setup Guide, it is in the Learning Library. It is also on Tave's website.
Yep, on the support site.
Yep, if you want to watch it there. So if you are coming to this and you're still thinking like, we're not completely set up, I need to get my Tave set up properly, go back and watch that. Then come back and watch this. If you have watched everything that we've done so far, welcome back. We thought that automations were so incredibly important that we wanted to give them their own holiday.
Yes.
So today is Tave Automation Day, and we're very excited. I can see myself. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? We're just making sure that everybody can see and hear if you are watching live. A little bit of housekeeping. If you are watching live, scroll down below the video feed and you will see a chat box. Log in with Twitter or with Facebook and you can ask us questions. Mostly what you're going to hear over the next little bit is Nicole saying a lot of very smart things and me saying, oh my God, and frantically typing as I try to build the automations while she's teaching them to us live, which is, we know that's going to happen.
For sure.
But if you do have questions, the point of us doing this live is so that we can demystify what automations are for you and show you just how incredibly robust they are, but also how easy they are.
Yeah.
When it really comes down to it. So we did take some user requests in the Tave user group and in the Wedding School Facebook group about automations that you'd like. So we're gonna bring you some of those as we can today. But if you have any questions as we go along, please do not hesitate. That is what this chat box is for below. That is why I have a computer in front of me so that I can monitor all of your questions and that I can feed them to Nicole and that she can answer them for you.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna take up too much of your time, but I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah,
Go for it.
So I think what we'll do as we wait for people to gather some suggestions or things that they're looking to automate themselves, I definitely want to first dive into kind of what automations are and how they're actually built, and also especially how they're different from workflow.
Hang on, can we hold for like half a second?
Oh no.
Somebody says it says the channel is off air.
It should be back on.
Is anybody, if anybody is seeing something that says off air, hit refresh.
Also, turn off any devices that are connected to Wi-Fi unnecessarily. I think we have too many things on Wi-Fi right now.
Okay.
The internet's choking up.
In here, hold on 1 second. You know, that's probably me also trying to upload to Lavaloo at the same time. I'm stopping it, don't worry. There we go. If at any point in time you do see any sort of broadcast issues, if you're watching it live and it's not buffering very well, you're having trouble seeing it, a lot of times a quick refresh will help that. If you are watching this later and you're having trouble with it, again, log out, log back in, hit refresh. Sometimes internets just clog up. Most of the time it's on the end of the person watching it, especially if you're watching it after the fact because it is uploaded to our Vimeo account and you're streaming it from your internet. So, all right, we're gonna jump right back in. If you have any other problems, let us know in the chat box, and we're gonna jump back with Daisy's comment, which said, oh my God, hi Nicole, I've sent you so many questions.
We were
Thank
just
you
talking
for your
about
help.
her. Yeah. Yeah, no.
Okay, so hopefully we should be good. This is the perils of coming to you live. It's true. So before you get too excited, we can jump you right back into your intro again.
Yeah, so yeah, we're gonna start with kind of how automations in general are constructed, the different things that you can automate and observe in Tave language, and also comparing, like I mentioned earlier, workflow versus automations because they are separate in Tave. So to start out, I guess with that, especially, I think I usually tell new users to set up things in their workflows, their job workflows and deliverable workflows that they, every little thing that you do along the way, from beginning to end of a job. And then later on, as you get more comfortable with your Tave account, is when I usually recommend figuring out which of those things you can actually have Tave do for you using an automation. So that's where these kind of come into play. So your workflows are going to be things that you need to, or your tasks in your workflow are going to be things that you need to physically have a part in doing or staying on top of that are due around certain specific time frames. whereas automations are things that Tave can actually handle for you. In general, going into the build of an automation, of course, that's going to be located in the automation section of your account, in your account settings.
So can I ask you the
Yeah.
common question about automations? Like, why would you, see if I can demystify this question here. Why would you build an automation versus adding a line in your workflow?
Mainly because it's something that Tave can just take care of. Workflows are kind of more for things that you need to manually have some type of involvement in doing, like a reminder to, I don't know, just as an example, like back up your files
Sure.
after a wedding or something that Tave clearly can't do anything for you yet. But it's definitely more for those types of things that there isn't really a set time frame maybe where they happen. Like I think we were talking earlier about some things that are part of our workflows that like checking in with clients maybe, or something like engagement sessions
Sure.
or events that happen that there's really no like definite time of when they happen. So it's something that you may need something like a task to check off, or something like a certain questionnaire coming in and a certain response triggers something that you need to do that Tave can handle for you. You can do that with an automation instead of a workflow.
Okay.
So what I always tell people is try to, when you're first thinking of your workflow for your jobs, is first build everything out as tasks in a workflow.
So don't jump into automations
Don't
right
jump
away.
right away. No, they're
Okay.
definitely advanced. They're usually the final part of setup. And there's something that you're always going to be changing and customizing and adding more.
Constantly.
Yeah,
I was literally
for sure.
rebuilding my workflow while you and I were sitting here preparing, and I'm going to need you to look at it for me
Yeah.
real quick when we go off air.
Yeah.
Make sure I didn't just break it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, you're always going to be changing, as with everything in Tave, as your business grows and you start doing different things for your clients, or as you start getting more comfortable with Tave and the things that you can do there, you're definitely going to be changing things as you go. I'm constantly changing things in my account for the better and to help Tave automate a lot more for me. So yeah, that's kind of the difference between the two.
And this is a constantly fluid process. Like
Yeah.
you're not building it, setting it, forgetting it.
Yeah.
You will constantly be going in. So if you think that by the end of today you'll have built out everything that you need and you'll never need to touch it again, it's almost like now you have the power to just keep going.
Yep.
So I'm constantly making small tweaks to things, but because my system is set up so well and so automated, these small tweaks just make life even better.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yes.
I'm constantly finding things that I've been doing myself, and this is kind of goes into when you may need to automate something. I'm constantly finding that, okay, I send this one email to my brides and grooms at a certain time frame, and I'm always doing it manually using an email template, which is great. I'm already saving some time there, but is there a way Tave can actually just do it for me? Because it's always done based on either a certain time frame or based on something else happening that Tave can see. That's what then will lead me to say, like, oh, can I actually just automate this by creating an automation so it just happens for me?
Right. We need to pause for just
yeah.
a second. For some reason, I just want to make sure everyone can see and hear. I'm going to hit refresh on my screen also. We had, again, I'm sorry for everyone watching live. I thought I was going to be a multitasking genius and upload my files from this past weekend's weddings to Lavalu while we were on air. And I realized that was a little bit more than my sad little internet could handle. People keep saying that we're blacked out and we're back again. Everyone who is watching, I know there are 50 of you out there. Can you please weigh in the chat block? It says mine blacks out about every 30 seconds or goes off air. Now it hasn't come back. Hold on. Dustin, should we start over? Should we keep going?
Should be good again. It's way more stable than it was 2 minutes ago.
Okay, Dustin, who is eventually we're going to put him on air so that you can actually see what he looks like, has informed me that things should get significantly better since I stopped uploading files to Lavalu at the same time. Okay, same here, but now it's all good. All right, sorry for the stop-start. Next time, I absolutely promise that I will not try to work while we're working. For those people who have chimed in and said, you've been off air from the beginning. Hit refresh at this point. I literally just hit refresh on my own screen, and now everything looks fine. So, okay, we're back, and
right.
we look good. We look good.
Oh, hi, Michelle.
All right. Dive
cool.
in.
All right, so now the fun part.
What, getting us on air?
Yeah. Now that we're good. All right, cool.
Okay, good. It's good now, but it was bad before. Well, it's going to be great now, so settle on in.
So the start of automations, kind of how they're built. I always tell people they're similar to like a if this then that type of formula. So the way you set up automations is you always start with you're going to be observing something, some main event, some thing, action happening that Tave can see. And then you tell it when you want whatever action it's going to be taking to happen. So in relation to that event.
Okay.
So in the build of the automation here, which is up on the screen, obviously you would give it an automation a name. So just for now, I'm just gonna give it just a fake name here to show you guys the different things that you can actually observe. So you can trigger things to automate based on a certain event being on your calendar, whether it's a phone call, a meeting of some sort, or a session or main event, something like a wedding day, wedding reception, or wedding ceremony. You can observe things like contacts' anniversaries or birth dates that are on their address book profiles. You can observe things like a contract being signed either by the clients or by yourself, which I use that for triggering a lot of things. Invoice balance due is definitely key for probably our #1 requested automation, which is invoice reminders, because everybody wants to get paid.
And they don't want to have to remember to
Yes.
tell people. I remember way back in the day when my invoice reminders were putting due dates on calendars and then manually emailing people.
Oh gosh, no. Yeah.
I'm old.
You
It's
don't
a long
need to
time
do
ago.
that. Other things like when a job hits a certain stage. So as you guys know, if you're here learning about automations, every job starts out initially as a lead and then it turns into booked, then hits fulfillment the day after the main event, the primary session, and then later on hopefully ends by getting completed eventually. So that you can observe those specific mile markers and trigger things to happen. Same thing with the primary session for the job, which is definitely a super popular thing to observe. Leads coming in, you can observe that, different interaction dates, a lead going stale, changing lead status, sending out an email can trigger other things to happen, payments coming in, whether they're manually recorded by yourself or coming in online, of course, questionnaires coming through the first time, and quotes expiring, orders being booked, and tasks being completed. So those are
everything.
Yeah, pretty much almost everything in Tave can trigger something else with an automation. So what you choose here is what it is that you want to be that initial trigger for the actions that you're going to set up.
So this is the when X happens, the automation goes.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in this case, say I was observing a session on the calendar. I would choose that, and then I would tell it when I want this thing to happen. So in general, say we say immediately, or I guess on the morning of, like so that the day of that session.
Okay.
Would make sense. You can have then in the conditions is where you can tell it like if you only want this to happen if the session itself that you're observing is something like a wedding ceremony.
Right.
Or
guys, I promise this sounds like a lot, but when we start actually building them for you,
it'll make sense.
It'll make total sense. Do not let us lose you 17 minutes in. Okay.
So yeah, the conditions you could tell it, it's basically your way of narrowing it down to be more specific, to only happen for certain clients or certain jobs or certain events. Because you may, for example, if you're a wedding photographer, but you also shoot portrait sessions, you're in many cases going to want a very different email going to your wedding clients than your portrait clients, as just one example. So yeah, that's what conditions are. So that's where you can set up one or more condition if needed. Not every automation needs a condition. And then the actions, this is where the fun stuff happens, where you then tell it what you want it to do for you. So the most common action is definitely the sending of an email. I would say that's 9 times out of 10 what most automations do. You're either sending your clients, in the case of invoice reminders, you're sending them an email with a link to their invoice reminding them that it's coming up due, or sending something like a wedding prep questionnaire before leading up to the wedding. You would do that by choosing send email and then building the email template and telling it which questionnaire to send out. But you can also do other actions with automations. Definitely, I would say the next most popular is probably adding tasks. I do this for some of mine where I will have, if something else happens, it will trigger me to, or triggers Tave to add a task that I need to take care of. Maybe it's due a week from that day, that moment, or due immediately. So this way when I'm logged in, I see right on my dashboard that I need to take some other kind of action. Updating fields you can do. So you can, after something happens, you can trigger a certain custom field on the job or just an existing field to update with certain information, which can be helpful. You can add events on the calendar as well when certain things happen, as well as web requests, which we probably won't get into any of those today.
Web requests?
Yeah,
I don't even know what that is.
Those are the most advanced. The only time that I use that, I use that for MailChimp. So we do have, and we do have suggestions for this in one of our advanced automations videos that we've filmed in the past. But basically, the use that I use this for, this option, is for automatically adding my clients to certain MailChimp mailing lists. So you can do that with a web
clever.
request. Yeah.
Okay.
Some people use it for texting too. People who have accounts with different text services, you can actually use web requests to shoot out a reminder text message or something like that to clients. So that's definitely the most advanced. So we probably won't get into
I'm compiling
building
a list
those.
of questions for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of fancy. So those are the actions that you can do. As with conditions, you can have more than one action on an automation. So a great example of this, which we will go into when we go into some examples, is you can have the checking off of a task trigger multiple things to happen.
You taught me how to do that.
So yeah, so that's helpful. So you don't need to separate, you don't need to duplicate an automation just to have one action for each one, if that makes sense. So you can have the checking of a task, update a field for you, send out an email for you.
All in one automation.
Yeah, you can do it all in one automation. One good tip too, which we'll definitely touch on because a lot of mine do this, when it comes to sending out emails, you do have several options too, which is really neat. So you can send it out immediately, or what I do for a lot of mine, and I've found a lot of people like this option as well, is you can actually set it to draft the email for you. So Tave actually will pre-build the whole email and have it ready to go to those recipients that you tell it to, but it'll just keep it in your drafts so that you'll see it hopefully on your dashboard if you have a tile there for your draft emails. And this way you'll be alerted that you need to check it over maybe before sending and hitting that send button. But a lot of my automations that observe or that trigger an email, I have just draft it just so that I still have that final say, and if I want to send it, or if maybe I just want to add a little something to it, I can before sending. So that's kind of an overview of what the build of an automation looks like. One good thing to know is when you do create your Tave account, which by now I imagine everybody watching has one, you should have some standard automations built in. We do include a few by default, one especially that's turned on, which will automatically move your jobs to the fulfillment stage the day after the primary session. So you want to keep that on. A lot of people accidentally disable that and then they wonder why things don't move. So definitely keep that on.
It comes in preloaded.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it will come with, I forget how many probably come on average in a typical account, but most of them are disabled.
There were a handful.
Yeah, there's some, most of them are disabled, and this way we let you make that choice to enable them and customize them a little bit, but you will definitely see one that moves them to fulfillment. The other common ones that I think come in automatically are invoice reminders. So we will include 3 invoice reminder automations for you that you can customize a little bit if you want to before turning them on if you would like to, because they are so popular. I personally don't have the invoice reminders on in my account. I do that a little bit different, but you can, if you don't have them you can go into the template gallery and install them as well. So those are kind of the overview there. And I think the best place then to kind of go into is the template gallery to show you guys definitely some things that are super common that people automate and things that you can also just get right from the template gallery and install right into your account. So if you haven't visited.
A lot of people don't know that the template gallery even exists.
Yeah, it's been around now for a while. However, especially our older users who've been around longer may just kind of forget that this is there. Or some new users will get started and they'll have a lot of settings built in for them. And then they kind of don't realize that you can go get more stuff. So the way that works is in the help menu of your account, there is an option there under community for installable templates. So when you click into there, that takes you into this beautiful gallery of good data and settings that you can install right into your account. And for today's purpose, you'll want to check out the automation section under item type. And this is where you can see a good amount of standard automations that we've built for you, so to take a lot of the guesswork out. You'll see a lot of mine say installed. Some of them I just installed before we got on here. But you can install these ones. This way you don't need to build them from scratch. And then you can adjust them as needed before enabling them for your own use.
So you really recommend, there's that little checkbox that says, don't check it until you're sure you're ready for it to go.
Yeah.
Be certain.
Be certain.
And if you're not certain, that's what they're there for.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I can't tell you the number of times I have messaged Tave to say, so I built this incredibly complicated automation. Can you look at it and make sure that it's going to work? I'm trying to do X, Y, Z. And Nicole will look at it and say, oh no, this is definitely not going to work. And then she'll fix it for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I always tell people, while we won't build tons of automations from scratch for you, if people do reach out and say, I would like to automate this, number one, is it possible? Number two, how do I do it? Typically, I'll tell you if it is something that's possible, but I will also then try to guide you and give you the right resources on our support site to help you put that together. We do have some articles on the support site under automations that cover all of those observables that we kind of touched on already, as well as the different types of actions and types of examples that are good for you guys to help figure those things out yourself. But of course, like Susan said, if you are not sure about something before you enable it and you send something to the wrong person by accident, or
I mean, I've never done that before. I have no idea.
Yeah, I definitely have a few examples of that myself. So you want to make sure, if you want to have somebody else take a look at it, we definitely will for you, and just kind of glance over and say, okay, this should work how you want, or you have to adjust this, or whatever. They are complex, so we don't expect you to just know how to build everything right off the bat. But
it does get easier as you start building them for yourself.
Yeah.
You start realizing the way to set it up to make it do specific things starts to become a little bit more innate over time.
Yeah, you kind of learn the language and the different conditions that are available, because those are kind of never ending. But yeah, so this is kind of a gallery of some standard common things. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, invoice reminders are definitely number one. People always want to have something like that to get those invoices paid and stay on top of those. So you can install them right from here. Some other really common ones are new lead autoresponders is a huge one. For those who just want to send out a general response to somebody's new inquiry, just to kind of let them know that you've received it, maybe send them some like preliminary information, pricing, something that says that you're going to be in touch with them with more information soon. You can totally download our installable here and tweak it as needed. And what's great about that is, and we'll go into conditions as well, is you can add conditions, like I said earlier, so certain ones go out just if it's a wedding versus a certain responder will go out if it's like a portrait session.
Or an engagement session or whatever.
Depending on the job type they chose on the contact form. So that's definitely a popular one as well. As well as similar to that is also like an out of office autoresponder. So if you do get leads that come in during a week or two maybe where you're on vacation or you're definitely going to be away, you can enable that and disable it as needed to go back and forth. So that's very similar setup, just different email. So I guess going into some of these, I would say invoice reminders.
That's one that pretty much everybody
Is going to want. Yeah. So the way these are set up, so just so you know, if you don't already have them in your account and you go to the template gallery to install them, when you click into the installable, you'll actually see here a summary of what it is, of course, but also what it will be installing. And in this case, we actually install 3 automations for you for the invoice reminders, because we have 3 different setups. One that sends it out 1 week before, a second one that sends it out 3 days before, I believe, and then one that's 3 days after when it's past due. So the way this setup works is, which I don't have it currently in my account, it's technically been deleted, but this is the basic build. Yeah, I kind of did something a little different.
Of course
but the way this the way that this works is it observes the balance being due on the invoice. So the good thing to note about invoice reminders is it's going out based on the due date of the invoice, not the date of like the wedding or something. Some people mix the two up. So it's actually looking at if the invoice is due on, June 1st, and if you have this executing 1 week before, it's going to go out 1 week before June 1st, not 1 week before like the wedding.
Which is based on the payment schedule that you stipulated when they booked you.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if your payment schedule consists of a retainer and then maybe a payment 3 months before the wedding, and then maybe a third payment the day of the wedding or a week before or something, that'll result in 3 total invoices. Hopefully the first one was paid at the time of booking. So then you'll have 2 other invoices. So invoice reminders will go out in relation to the due date of those invoices. The other good thing to know about these is they will only go out if there is still a balance due. So you don't have to worry about these going out if somebody pays an invoice early, either online through the link you sent them or that they found in their client portal, or mailed you a check or something. As long as there is a balance due, it will trigger. So it won't trigger if it's 0, which is good. The condition here is one that we actually build right into these for you, that it checks to make sure that there's no payment promise on the invoice. And what that basically means is if somebody chooses one of your offline payment methods, so if you have mail a check or something else available for them to choose on an invoice, and they fill that out and say that they've mailed you a check and you're going to get it in 3 days or whatever, that creates what's called a payment promise on the invoice inside Tave for you. So it will basically tell you when you look at that invoice, hey, the client promised that you're going to have this payment by June 10th. So if there is a payment promise on it, we won't trigger this email for you, because you don't want to bother them about an invoice that they technically have already processed a payment for. So keep that condition in there. That's a good one to have. Then the action, this is where...
Which, by the way, I wish people would use the payment promise, because what happens with me is people see the invoice
and then they just go
and
write the check.
Oh, I'm going to mail you a check. And then I literally had to respond to someone today who was like, I don't know why you keep sending me these. I mailed you a check. And I'm like, but you didn't tell me.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of those things. Or if technically, if they tell you offline that they've mailed you one, maybe if they've emailed you or something, you technically could pull up the link, the direct link to the invoice, and mark it as coming yourself, just so they don't get that.
Right.
As a little tip there. But the way the email then is built here in the action, this is set up to send an email immediately. So what immediately means in this aspect is, say the invoice is due, June 10th, and it's going out a week before, so that's June 3rd. It's going to go out that morning. So automations that are triggered on a certain day, whether it's so many days before or after something happening, will go out around 8 a.m. your studio time. So usually anywhere between 8 and 8:10 a.m. is typically when most of your automations are going to go out, and you will get an email from us notifying you like, hey, these are all the things that we've done for you this morning by automation. So
I love that email.
So yeah, it's a great way to like double check things are happening, and kind of just know that your automations are working. But so what this says immediately, this means at around 8 a.m. on the week before an invoice is due, it's going to send this email. You can tell who you want it to go to. So in most cases for invoices, we recommend keeping it at the option that says determined by observed item, which basically means it's always going to send it to whoever is the recipient of that invoice, whoever is liable for paying that invoice. This way you don't have the wrong person, if there's many clients on a job, getting that email. You can either choose from an email template you have in your account here. So you would choose an invoicing one. Yeah, I have a lot. I have a lot of email templates.
You know, every time I think I'm doing really good here, I sit down with you.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. You could choose from an email template if you've already built it there, which is common for a lot of automations. For ones that you install from our template gallery, instead of also adding an email template to your list, we actually build the message for you right inside the action. So it lessens that crazy list. And it already has some of the standard tokens that you're going to want here. So this is just a generic email. You can modify this. You can swap out the bottom with the brand email signature token if you have one set up. But basically this will pull in the amount that's due on this specific invoice only. It'll pull in the due date, the person's name, of course, you're sending it to, and then also the link to pay it online, so they can view the invoice and pay it or print it. So that's kind of how that setup works for a generic invoice reminder. And if you install that set from our template gallery, it will install 3, like I mentioned. So if you want to send maybe more than one, maybe 1 month out, 1 a week out, maybe after it's due if they're a little late. So that's definitely the most popular one, I would say. Some other things like a new lead autoresponder. That's definitely a great one. That simply just looks at a lead coming in, so a lead being created. Naturally, that will include leads that come in through your contact form, as well as ones that you create manually from inside your account. So that's one good thing to know. However, if you install our template gallery, it will already be preset with a condition that only runs when the lead is what we call a web lead, meaning it came in through an online contact form and it wasn't manually created by yourself. Most cases, people only want these to trigger when it comes in through one of your contact forms. So that's a good condition to have there. And then in the action, it's just a simple email that goes to the job or lead clients in this case, which is going to be anybody that's checked off as a client, which whoever inquires through the contact form will be by default for you. So we have it set up here that it actually sends delayed. So like I mentioned earlier, when you send an email by automation, you have 3 options. You can send it immediately, which is definitely pretty common. You can save it as a draft, as I mentioned, which I do for a lot of mine. And you can also send later. So if you want it to go out at a small delay, so many minutes or maybe even a few hours later or anything, something like a new lead autoresponder, if you want it to look kind of more natural, like you actually maybe sent this email, you can set it up for like a small delay, like we have here 5 minutes. So that will, as soon as they send in that contact form, it'll pre-schedule this to go out 5 minutes later to that person.
That's awesome.
Sends them just a very generic, like, thanks for contacting us. We'll get back to you shortly. This is where I said earlier, you can include things like pricing guides or just general information about what they inquired about, just to kind of give them something to work with before you get them a more detailed response. You can add another condition here. So another popular condition for a new lead autoresponder is definitely job type. So if you want, like I said earlier, a very different email to go to wedding inquiries from, say, a portrait inquiry, this is where you can set up a condition. So in conditions, you can choose what token you want to observe, basically what field or what data you want to consider in this automation. And in this case, if you wanted to do one for job type, you would just search for job type here, and you'll see that token available. and you can choose from different values. So in this case, for a job type field, you can choose that it must exactly match a certain job type, it must contain certain text, it must not contain. So for example, if I only wanted this specific email to go out for just my weddings, my wedding leads, I may have a condition that says the job type must exactly match wedding. If that's what my job type is called for weddings, I would create this condition here, and we'll tell you underneath there what that kind of means in layman terms, like what the condition is that you are building technically is going to mean. So if that sounds good, you could just save that, and so that adds that condition. So now when I enable this automation, when a new lead comes in online, it's only going to trigger if the lead is inquiring about a wedding, if they chose the wedding job type on the contact
So
form.
what is your process? When you get a lead for a wedding, how much is automated versus how much is you personally reaching out?
So I live in front of my computer, working for Tave, of course. So I respond manually. And I still respond within like 5 minutes to every single lead. But it's because I'm in front of my computer or sometimes on my phone. I do have, if this then that, I do have, I think, a recipe they call it, which you guys can install if you happen to use if this and that. That actually also sends me a text message when I get a new lead. Sometimes it's a little delayed, but it's good for whenever I'm traveling or I'm not looking at my phone or my emails or my Tave account. So that's kind of, sometimes I'm a little delayed, but usually I get back to them right away. And I do it manually only because, especially for weddings, I have about 10 or so different email templates. As you saw, I have a lot. But I have email templates that are super specific. So I have one that if I'm available and the wedding's in New Jersey, I send them a certain email template. Or if it's out of state, I send them one that has very slightly different wording that talks about travel. Or if I'm not available, of course, I send them a totally different email template. So I don't automate those responses.
And I have mine based by venue.
Yeah,
like
I have some like that
additional
too.
ones that are like venues I really love working at. I'll take my basic response and then I'll be like, and you probably want to look at this blog post and you probably also want to look at these images and this is why I like your venue. And I just keep building those as I go along, which is why I manually respond to them.
Yeah, so I manually do it just because I like to give them that full response in one email and not have to send 2 different emails. But I also like to answer their questions as well if they have any.
You could set up, like, let's say you do multiple different types of things, like if you do photo booths.
Yes.
And you don't want to manually respond to every photo booth inquiry. You could manually respond to your wedding inquiries and have autoresponders go to your photo
just for a
booth
certain
inquiries.
type of, yeah, exactly. So yeah, things like portrait sessions, photo booths, people in totally different industries, that you don't have so many conditions there. You can send them a lot of information about your service in a nice generic email that looks a little bit personalized as well, and gets them makes them happy because they're getting a response pretty quick. So that's kind of a new lead autoresponder. Again, a very popular thing people like to set up. So that's in the template gallery as well. Similar to that is the out of office reply, which you can totally install that. It's essentially the exact same thing, except you're going to change the message maybe a little bit to say that you're away, traveling or whatever. So it may just require a slightly different message. I rarely use that, but it's good to have just so that for that time frame you can enable it and then disable it when you get back. So very similar setup there. Another common thing people automate, which we have some samples for you in here, are things like session reminders, meeting reminders, or really just any kind of email or thing that you want to happen before or after a certain event. So we have those here. I'm gonna pull up the session reminder as a good example. Basically, the generic setup that we have for you that you can customize further before turning on basically just looks at a session on the calendar. So you'll see here it's observing calendar session. And in this case, it's set up 3 days before. You can, of course, change that to be 2 days before, the morning of, a week before, whenever you want this email or whatever to happen. But the important thing here is the conditions. So a great example of this is something like an engagement session. You're going to want to send out maybe different tips or different information about their upcoming session than you may for like a family portrait session. Or a really good tip here, which I know happens to a lot of people, is to make sure you exclude things. So you can tailor it to include only certain sessions, but you also may want to consider, okay, do I want this for everything except for something? So a perfect example is the wedding ceremony or wedding reception, or you want to make sure that you're not reminding clients that their wedding is coming up in a week, because I'm pretty sure they know that, hopefully. So for example, you may not want session reminders to go out for, you could say, I don't want this to go out for anything that has a job type of wedding. So this way, they won't get this for any of their wedding sessions. And then you could just create a separate one that is specifically for engagement sessions, because obviously those may be on wedding jobs. So you can tailor it to that. And the best way to do that, which this is a good tip to know, which we have an article on the support site for, we call it using target tokens. So the way that you target the specific session or phone call or meeting event type in this scenario is by using a token here in the condition called target type name. And you can see some examples here, but you're going to choose target type name must exactly match or must not contain something here. So this basically tells it, I wanted to check if there's a session coming up in the calendar in 3 days, a session event type. So if the event type,
but a wedding.
Yeah. So I could have here, or in this case, if I want this only to go for an engagement session, for example, and my engagement session event type is just strictly called engagement session, I could say here, I only want this to run if the targeted session that the automation is looking at must exactly match engagement session. So this will tell you here that the session's type must, or the name of the session must exactly match engagement session. So if I have that here as a condition, this automation, whatever email I'm sending out, is only going to run if it's an engagement session coming up on the calendar. And you'll see here in the email build, we actually use target tokens in here as well. And this is the same reasoning here, is you only want it to pull in the start date, the time, location, or whatever information you're pulling in to this email for the specific event that's being targeted by the automation. So that engagement session that's coming up in 3 days. So one good reason for this is, just as a good example, if you have multiple meetings or multiple engagement sessions or something on a calendar for the same job, you don't want this to pull in, if you're using the engagement session tokens, you don't want it to pull in the start times and locations for multiple engagement sessions.
I was wondering about that.
Because there's no way for the system to know, okay, which one are you technically pulling in here, because they all use those same tokens.
Yes.
So sending out an automated email like this immediately with Tave using the target tokens is your safest bet for pulling in like the correct details for that specific event on the calendar. So that's why we recommend setting up like this. By default, when it comes to sending emails to people, like I mentioned before, you can choose different job roles here up top. So all the different job roles that are in your account you can choose, or you can choose clients, which is a common one. So something like an engagement session, I probably would choose here to send it to clients, just because I want to make sure that both people get that based on who's on the contact list for that job. But you can choose different job roles here. And then down below.
So if you wanted to email someone's grandmother and tell them that their engagement session is coming up.
Exactly. You can get as crazy as you want. Actually a great example of this, just while I'm thinking about it, for things like engagement sessions or really any kind of session, if you work with like a hair and makeup team and you often have hair and makeup, or you offer that as part of your service to your clients for something like an engagement session, you can have 3 actions here. And this is a great example of why you may have more than one action on an event or on an automation. because you can have, for example, one email that goes to the clients that says like, hey, I'm looking forward to working with you or shooting your engagement session in 3 days. Here are some tips, like what to wear or whatever. But then you can have another action that sends to the hairdresser, hairstylist, or and that will only go out if there is somebody with that role on the job. So the automation won't fail altogether. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not like it's going to be like blasting emails to nobody or something. It's only going to run that action if there's somebody to
run
contact.
the action too.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can have like 3 actions here. You can have one that goes to the clients. You can have one that goes specifically to the hairstylist email, and same thing for makeup. If you have a separate makeup person on the contact list for that job, you can have it go to that person. So that's just a little inspiration for when you may need more than one action there on something like a session reminder. So you can, similar to session reminders, you can also have call reminders and meeting reminders. And one area that I use for meeting reminders is I have automation set up for my wedding consultations. So my, let me go back here to my account and I'll pull up actually one of these examples. So I have Tave automatically draft a wedding consultation reminder beforehand. And then I also actually observe the consultation and send an email afterwards. So I like to send them like a nice little thank you email that's very simple. It just says like, thanks for meeting with me yesterday. I had a great time chatting with you and whatever. So I have 2 different automations for that. So I have consultation reminders, whether it's in person or if it's phone call. And then I have same thing, thank you emails afterwards for if it's in person or phone call. And I'll show you kind of how one of those is built for a little inspiration. But in this case, I'm observing a meeting on the calendar because my wedding consultation event type is set up as a meeting, not a session. And this tells it to execute 1 day later. So again, that'll happen around 8 a.m. my time, the following morning after the day of their session or their wedding consultation. Down here in the condition, this is where I tell it in one condition that I want to make sure that the meeting's name, like that event type, must contain the text consultation, because I have a separate meeting event type in my account for their final meetings, because I do like what I call a pre-wedding meeting later. So I want to make sure that this doesn't run the day before or the day after my pre-wedding meeting. So that's how I target that. But then also I do something where if I'm doing a consultation with a couple over the phone, I use a location that I have in my address book that's just called phone, or phone call or something. But basically, because I use that location all the time when it's a phone call, I can target in an automation that this email only goes if the location of that event that it's observing didn't include the word phone call or phone in the location. So that's kind of my like little trick to having 2 different email templates here. So I have 2 automations for these post-consult thank yous. And really the only difference is the language I use in the email template. Of course, I'm not going to say like, thanks for like meeting with me yesterday, even though technically I guess it's a phone meeting. But I like to kind of say something a little different about chatting on the phone versus meeting in person. So I have 2 automations for this. And in this one, that's for in-person meetings. I, again, as I said earlier, save it as a draft just to kind of check it over before I send. I always just want to double check. It drafts it automatically to anybody that's checked as a client on the leads worksheet there. And it kind of just says like, hey, thanks for meeting with me. It pulls in the day of the week for the consultation event using that token. And I kind of just say like, I had a great time chatting with you. You know, if you have any questions at all, shoot me an email. I actually even give them my phone number if they want to text me instead. And yeah, it's just like a nice little simple thank you. So that's how I built that one.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So someone said here,
Yeah.
I am responding to him first. Someone said, I run a small wedding photography business. I'm not sure, but I think that personal contact with everyone is better than automated emails. And what I think the point that I want to make is we're not advocating writing cold corporate emails that go out that sound like they're coming from a mailing list.
No.
And for example, if I'm going to write, like, it was nice meeting you last night, I'm going to write some version of the exact same line over and over and over again. Why wouldn't I do what I can to streamline that process so that I can take time to make things more personal?
Yeah.
Like, why would I sit down and write an invoice email reminder to people every single time when it's just an invoice reminder?
Be the same
I'm going to write the same
language.
thing every time. And creating these drafts doesn't mean that you have to send cold corporate sounding email drafts. They create the drafts so that the bulk of the writing is done and you can go in and customize it. So we're not advocating that you make your business automated like a robot. I'm advocating that you automate what you can so that you can put more of your personality in your business. So that I'm not spending time writing and rewriting the same things over and over and over again. Like when I respond to a lead, I'm using email templates because it's the same things that I say every single time. I can just then, if I have 2 seconds, I can go in and write a personal 2-second paragraph in that email versus having to write the whole email from scratch.
For sure, yeah. And I tell people, similar to what I said earlier about starting everything out as a workflow, like a very detailed workflow before you get into automations, and then figuring out what you can automate. Along the way there, you're going to be creating email templates for things that you say all the time. And I tell people the reason I have like a few hundred email templates in my account is because I, like, maybe once a month, if that, I start out a conversation from scratch. Like 99 times out of 100, I am using an email template to start out the conversation, if it's something I'm initiating. Of course, when they reply and then I reply, I'm all doing that manually. But when it comes to me telling them something, sharing tips with them, checking in with them, it's always me starting those conversations. So it makes sense, like you said, if you're going to be saying kind of the same things every time, it makes sense to have a template for it. Also, it helps avoid typos if you're typing on your phone or just on the fly from scratch. It
actually has improved my customer service.
Yeah, for sure.
Dramatically. Like in the year and a half or so that I've really been delved into Tave and worked on automations and templates and everything, the number of times people have remarked how quick I am to respond, how thorough I am, how helpful I am, how much education I have for them. This has not hurt my personal relationships with my clients. It's made it better. So I thought that sort of bore. I wrote him a huge long paragraph and I was like, we'll just actually talk about that.
Good, And like exactly what you said, I would say more than not, my brides who respond to my inquiry or my like initial response start out with saying like, thank you so much for getting back to me so fast. I just met with
helpful information.
I just met with a couple last week who actually literally just booked me yesterday. That when we sat down and started talking, they said, "You responded faster than any vendor we've ever reached out to so far." And I did it manually too, which makes it even more impressive. But it's because I used an email template and it had all the information they needed. It answered their questions. And then I even had, which kind of made me laugh, I was shooting a wedding last weekend and two of the guests were two future clients of mine for their wedding next year. And the groom literally doesn't even know his own wedding date. Like he knows what month it is, he forgets the actual day. But he told me he loves all the emails I send. And he's like, thank you so much for like providing all this information to us. And like, cause I check in with them in the beginning, it's kind of a little email heavy and I'll warn clients that, you know, I'm going to check in, I'm going to be sharing tips with you and giving you recommended vendors and, you know, checking in along the way because I've had couples that have also told me, oh, I don't even know if my florist is showing up to my wedding. Like I haven't heard from her in months. And I love that you check in with us at least and like let us know that you're not forgetting about our wedding. You know, most of them don't know that I have an automation that does the initial check-in for me, but they love it and they love feeling, you know, that customer service.
And you have a stable of clients. Like this year I have 47 weddings. And if I have to write an email reminder or write in my to-do list to reach out to people every 6 weeks to 2 months or so, I'm going to spend all day, every day writing emails.
Yeah.
But instead I automate these cheerful little check-in emails that are like, hey, I hope everything is going well. I'm here if you need me. Here's some helpful information.
Yep.
That's not me being like I care so much. I want to make sure they're getting this information.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And with the use of tokens, that helps personalize things a little bit. So it looks, even though it's automated, it looks like you personally drafted it to them. But also the ability, like I said, I do set a lot of my emails that go out by automations to just draft. And the main reason I do that is because as soon as Tave drafts it for me and does most of that legwork that would have taken me a few minutes of my time, I can still see it on my dashboard. It'll show up at the top of my dashboard that I have a draft that I need to send. And then I'll change it a little bit or make it a little bit more personalized before sending. No,
I
you're
had
good.
a very account-specific question. And one of my clients is actually in the chat room right now, and Daisy said, Susan responded so quickly to my wedding inquiry that I sent late at night. I'll never forget it. I was so thrilled and relieved to hear that she was available. I went to bed happy, and it was a great jumping off point for our continued communication and resulting wedding.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daisy.
Yeah, so it totally makes a difference. And I think Dave on our team actually even said he sat down and as he's been automating more and more of his business with his own Tave account, he sat down once and kind of calculated how much time he probably spends or would be spending drafting these emails and doing all these things that Tave's handling by automation for him, that it saves you hours per job. And if you're doing, 30 weddings a year or whatever, that's like days of your time you're getting back per year. Yeah, that you don't have to sit there and draft when you're going to be saying the same thing over and over. So that's especially for emails. And of course, you can use automations for other cool things other than emails, which we will get into. But that is definitely the number one thing people automate. So just going into a couple other, following up on leads is a huge one. People want to make sure they do. And to get that business, stay on top of them. And that kind of comes into play with automations, tying it actually to lead status. So we talked about lead status in our other videos, so make sure you go back to that one. It's very, very important to make sure your lead status rules are set up properly. But just to give a quick little jump back into that to show you how my follow-ups are done with automations, is in my lead status rules, I have some rules in here that after I reach out to a lead that contacted me, 7 days later, I have Tave set the lead status to follow-up email for me. So it basically, and you can do two things with that. You can either have it switch to follow-up email or needs follow-up, I think is our standard. And then you can have that show up on your dashboard so you can see front and center, okay, I have a lead I need to follow up with today. Or this is a great example of when you can go one step further and have Tave send that follow-up email for you or draft it, which is what I do. Just in case, like we were talking about earlier, like in case maybe you've already been emailing with them and maybe you don't want that email to go out, or you want to reword it a little bit, or there's a number of circumstances where you may not want that to go out exactly as is. So you can do that with automation.
Instead of drafting so that I can look at it, I have mine automatically send, but I also have something set up that if I respond to a lead and someone emails back to that at all, it moves it to a lead status called leads emailed back. And that could be someone who emailed me back with a question. It could be someone who emailed me back and said, oh, you're too expensive. It could be someone who emailed me back and said, well, we're still looking on setting a date. It puts it in another place. So those are the people that I go back and check on, and then everyone else gets an autoresponder. So there are a million different ways that you can configure this thing. And as you delve into Tave more and as you delve into your business more, you'll figure out what works best for you. And you have lots of different options no matter which way you decide to go.
And so this is how my automation is actually set up. And this is specific to weddings because, again, I have different follow-up process for weddings than I do for my portrait clients. Portrait clients, I actually don't draft a follow-up for because sometimes by the time I'm about to follow up anyway, I already have those weeks or months already booked, and I kind of let them make that decision. So what I do here for weddings, Again, I'm observing the lead status changing, in this case, to follow-up email, which is the status that I showed earlier that I have it automatically moved to 7 days after they've inquired. It goes to follow-up email. And so I have that condition here do exactly that. It tells Tave, okay, when a lead status changes, I only want this email to be triggered if it's changing to follow-up email. So this here says the token it's observing is lead status, and it's saying it must exactly match follow-up email. And also, I have a second condition that tells it also must have the job type of wedding, because again, I only want this to run for my wedding leads. Down here in the action is where I have it put together that follow-up email for me. And these are for people, I should clarify, these are for people who I haven't even met with yet, so they're not for people I've had a consult with. I have an almost identical automation that does the same thing a week after I've actually met with them. And the way it does that is it observes the consultation on the calendar like we were doing in the other automation, and it actually is set to run a week after the consultation, because I do like to check in a week later and just kind of see if they have questions, see if they've made a decision. And I let them know that at the meeting that I will be checking in. But this one here, like I said earlier, saved as a draft. It goes to partner A, who is it's the job role I use for whoever my main contact is in the case of a wedding. Mm-hmm. And it's just a nice email that just says, hey, thanks for inquiring on this day. It actually, with that token, the job inquiry date, it pulls in the exact date they reached out to me. So it makes it look a little bit more personalized to them. It has, of course, their name. I just kind of follow up and just see if they have any questions. I do have, and this is actually a great example of what we were talking about earlier, there are scenarios where you may need to add a little something to the email. And so in this case, I like to have a blank here so that I can pull in like dates that I have coming up, that I have some availability if they're interested in moving forward and scheduling a consultation. So I just quickly glance at my calendar and pop in some dates here to let them know like when I have open in the next like week or two to get together if they're interested in moving forward. So so that's kind of how that one's set up. You can have a similar thing, maybe with just a different condition for the job type. So you can actually duplicate an entire automation. That's another little tip we didn't mention earlier, is there's a duplicate button over here on the right. So if you go through the effort of building an automation or installing one of ours and changing it up a little bit, you can duplicate the entire thing and rename it and adjust it as needed, and just change a couple things to, if the only difference is maybe the job type, and then choose a different email template or tweak the wording a little bit. So that's definitely a huge time saver when it comes to having multiple similar automations.
Emily Pogozelsky just hopped in and
Oh,
says, this
Emily's
is so
here.
incredibly sexy.
I was waiting for her
We
to
all
join.
have our weird things. My things are organization and spreadsheets.
Data,
And
yeah.
This is a very exciting day for me.
Yeah, no, automations are very, very fun and
dreamy.
sexy.
Well, I just think in all the time that I would be spending doing all of this stuff, what can I be doing to either live my life better or make my client experience better? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, the time you're saving is crazy. So yeah, following up, I'm trying to think of, I know somebody actually, I think in one of our posts, had asked about quote reminders and following up with people after you've actually sent them a quote.
Yes.
So you can definitely do that. Let me see if I actually even have that. I think I do it in like maybe a different way. Let's
These
see.
are so beautiful, all of your emails.
I don't know if I have it in here. I think I do it slightly different. But basically, the way you would set that up, let's see. Okay, I do have a quote expiration one. Just kidding. This is probably from the template gallery, actually. So
Sophia's really excited. She's like, this is what I need. This is what she's
good.
sitting here like. She's very excited about this.
So the best way to follow up on a quote is actually by observing the quote expiration date. And we have this in the template gallery, so you can install this automation template and then adjust it as we're talking here. But the key with this is the reason you want to observe the quote expiration is because it's the only way.
You should draw this out actually because she's so excited. Like I can see her like leaning over her computer ready to do it. Because she said, client says I want to book you, you send the quote, then they go silent, I forget to nudge,
Yep.
and then I lose the booking.
Yeah.
You're about to save a life here.
Yeah, so the key is, number one, on all your quote templates, which you should be using, is setting a default expiration time frame. So if you kind of have a general time that maybe your pricing is good for, or even if you don't even tell the clients that because they don't see that expiration, that could solely be for the purpose of just getting these reminders to go out at a certain time. So the best way to do this, say your quote expires in 2 weeks. Say your pricing is good for that, locked in for that amount of time for them. You can have your quote templates have that 2-week expiration, and then you can have, if you want to check in a week after sending, so essentially a week before it expires, you would set this up to observe quote expiration date, like this is done here, and then you can just choose the execution time. So if I want it to go, 7 days in this case before the expiration date, so that would be 1 week after sending it out, you would set it to execute 7 days before. And then again, automations do not require a condition to run. However, in this case, if you maybe had different wording that you would use for a wedding
What if you
person,
just wanted it to go for weddings? Because like if
then
I
you would
send
add a job type condition there.
Add a job, okay.
Yeah, so if you only want, if you don't care about like portrait clients maybe booking those quotes as much, or if you just have different wording that you would want to use for the email for a wedding client versus a portrait or whatever type of job it is, you can add a condition for job type must contain or must exactly match or must not contain, whatever, you can get crazy there. The key with this, and the reason why it's so important to observe the quote expiration, is because that's the only observable that Tave has where it'll know exactly what quote you're even referencing because it's built into the observable.
So job date and all of that would make no sense here.
No,
It
because
has to
it
be
won't
on
know
quote
which quote to
expiration.
link. So
Okay.
you technically, while you could trigger it based on sending out the initial quote, like, so it could observe the status changing to sent quote, for example, on a lead. You can do that, and you can trigger an email based on that so many days later, but you wouldn't be able to pull in a link to the quote in the email. So you can send like a generic, like, hey, do you have questions?
That's what someone literally just
Yeah.
asked. Can you set automations for a specific time after the quote is sent? Or does it need to be in relation to when the quote expires? Couldn't you set an automation that was like 24 hours after you send a quote to just send an email that says,
Yeah,
hey, I'm just making
just
sure
checking
you
in.
got the quote?
Yeah, so you could do that.
And then you would send the expiration one, not based on when you sent it, but based on when it
it's
expires.
about to expire, yeah. The main benefit of using the expiration, like Victoria had asked, is it gives you the ability, like we have in this template here, to actually pull in a link to that same quote. So they don't have to go digging back to that original email that you sent them. And instead, it'll pull in the link to that quote because Tave knows which quote it's observing.
Because that would be annoying to get a reminder email and then be like, crap, I gotta
now I gotta go find that email. So that's why this is the way to do it, at least the best way to do it.
I'm making a note.
Yes. So you can pull in, again, you can pull in this email and this reminder, you can pull in the link to the quote. You could even pull in, again, the expiration date itself if you want to pull in with that token, the quote expiration date token. You can pull in the date just to remind them, like, hey, my pricing's only good till this day, or you're only, guaranteed this wedding date.
This
or
is good.
Portrait, yeah.
Ooh, this sounds good.
And similar to the invoice reminders, which we talked about earlier, in the to field, this is key to have it go to what we have here is determined by observed item, which is the same thing as the invoice. And what this means is that it's going to go to whoever the recipient is set as for the item we're observing here. So in this case, it's a quote before it was an invoice. So you can have it go, this ensures that the email is going to go to the person who is responsible or assigned to that quote that you sent out. So that's what that means.
Good.
And same thing for the bottom where it says reference item for tokens. We haven't talked about that yet. It's a little bit, I guess I would say more tricky. It's kind of something that people often have issues with. But what that field means is you're only going to choose something there if you're sending something out with this email. So something like a questionnaire for the first time you're sending out, or a quote you're sending out initially for the first time. That's when you choose a certain questionnaire template quote template or contract template that you want Tave to add to the lead or job and send. So in this case, we don't want to choose anything there because it's the item it's sending, the quote, has already been added, it's already there, and it's just pulling a link to the same thing in.
Oh,
so you
really
don't need to
smart.
choose a new one, because if you choose a certain quote template here, it's actually going to send them a second one. You don't want a second,
okay.
you don't want a different one. So that's what that means, and that's an important thing to kind of understand. And it's one of those things that usually once you make the mistake and choose something or don't choose something, you kind of never forget what that means after that. So that's the best way, I would say, to follow up with people specifically on a quote. And similar to invoices, actually, a good thing to know about this will only run if the quote hasn't been booked. So whereas if you observe the quote sent lead status, there's a chance, unless you have extra conditions in there that check for the stage and things like that,
It could send to
it
everyone.
could send, and they may have already booked, and then it's
Yeah.
like silly to.
Then you made it weird.
Yeah. So by observing the quote expiration date, it also ensures that the quote hasn't been booked, because once they book it, it's no longer a quote,
Like
it's
one
an order.
time with a studio management software that I used in the past that we will not name it in person, accidentally sent out invoice reminders to invoices that had not been paid, even if the event had been canceled.
Oh.
And I got an email from every single bride who had canceled her wedding with me in the past 4 or 5 years saying, you know, I canceled my wedding 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, that's awkward. Yeah, so you don't want that to happen. So
That happened when I was on air with Creative Live, and I literally got off air to all of these emails of like,
no.
I was heartbroken and now you're reminding me of it. And I was like,
oh no. I kind of have a similar example to that we'll talk about when we talk about contracts. So yeah, what not to do with your automations. So yeah, quote expiration, huge one. I would say the other big thing, 2 other big things before we go on to like really cool personal favorites. Other common things people automate are anniversary and birthday related emails or reminders. So you can observe somebody's birth date if you've collected it before, or their anniversary, so that you can send them an email saying happy anniversary. This is something we do have 2 automations for in the template gallery that you can install. One of them sets the anniversary date. So if we pull that one up, actually I do have that in my account. I have it set up that this will observe the job's primary session, which in the case of a wedding is the wedding ceremony or reception, whatever you have set up there, 1 day after this runs. So not the day of, this is important. You have it set to run the day after, so the morning after their wedding. Tave will only run this on a wedding because of the conditions I have here. And down here, the actions, if you use the bride tokens, like bride and groom, or you use partner A, partner B, whatever you use, you want to make sure your actions are set to update the bride anniversary field or groom anniversary field or partner A, whatever, client, spouse. You want to set their anniversary field on their profile to yesterday. And you literally just write the word yesterday there. And Tave knows, okay, let me check the calendar. We're going to set their anniversary date to the day before today, when this is running. So that's how this works. And it's already set up for you. You literally, other than maybe changing the tokens used in the action there, depending on the roles that you use for your couples, that's the only change you should have to make to this to have it start running. And this will help going forward set your anniversaries for all your clients, for your wedding clients, on their profiles. And then coupled with another automation will trigger an anniversary email either to them or to yourself. So I actually have one. Let me go up here, anniversary. Oh goodness, I have so many automations. Here it is. Okay, so to automate the email or whatever you want to happen when somebody's anniversary is coming up, all you observe is contact anniversary. And so I have it actually, I don't send an email to them on their anniversary, which is common, what most people probably do. And we have that automation set up that way in the template gallery. But what I do is I have it observe their anniversary, and actually 7 days before, I have it email me, because I like to get a heads up that they have an anniversary coming up. And it actually, I'll show you what it looks like. It reminds me basically to schedule something on social media for their anniversary date in advance, as well as send them an anniversary card. So I
Do you
do
that on
that
every
instead of
anniversary or just their first?
just their first.
Gotcha.
And the way I automate that or build that in there, so I don't get this email for all my couples for eternity, I have a custom field. And we did touch a little bit on custom fields during the wedding school guide earlier, but I have a custom field that's on my contact profiles, and it's a checkbox field, and it's called First Anniversary Card Sent. So what I do is, as part of this automation, I have it check to make sure that field is empty, that it hasn't been checked yet. So basically it means their first anniversary hasn't come yet. So when I get this email from Tave a week before their first anniversary, and I prepare their social media and prepare a card for them, I also go into their profile and check that field on both their profiles in the address book. And that makes it so going forward, when it hits their second anniversary, third anniversary, fourth anniversary, it doesn't run for them, if that makes sense.
So first anniversry card sent is a custom field?
It's a custom field. It's a checkbox field. And I can actually pull that up really quick too. So that is just set up here in my custom fields.
And you made a custom one for it, correct?
Yep. It's just a custom field. It's a checkbox field. This is exactly how it's set up. It's super easy. The key here is that you make sure that it's set up for contacts, not jobs.
It's a checkbox.
And it's a checkbox. But instead of for job profile up top, you choose for contact profile. And this makes it available on all of your address book profiles for your different contacts.
But if you've got two people that are contacts for weddings,
you update that on each of their profiles.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great.
Because, for example, so say their wedding happens the morning after, Tave, using that other automation we just went over, Tave sets their anniversary for me, for both like the bride and the groom or whoever the couple is. It sets on both of their personal address book profiles in Tave, it sets their anniversary date to say, June 6th, 2018. Well, then that next year, a week before June.
Okay, hang on, back up again. After the wedding,
it sets their anniversary to that
and
previous
Tave automatically does that. That's not something you have to set up.
Well, it's something with that the automation that we went over right before this one.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so you can download that from the template
Gotcha.
gallery. So yeah, Tave will set it for you using that. And then now this is a separate automation that specifically triggers that email or whatever it is that you want to happen for their actual anniversary as it comes up. So some people send a nice simple like happy anniversary email every month or every year, which is great too. You can do that on the morning of their anniversary. What I do is I just do the card and social media and whatever. So I actually email myself, and it's based on that condition, as well as another handy one for, I have a custom tag. So in your account settings, there's a section for tags. It's a great way to just group people or label people a certain way that are kind of unique. But I have a divorced tag. So I like to just make sure if I find out through the grapevine or somebody tells me or whatever that one of my couples has since gotten divorced, I like to check them off that way with that tag just to avoid things like this. I haven't had any yet that have gotten divorced in the first year. However, it does happen. But I would like to make sure if that does happen that I'm not, preparing an anniversary card for them and all of this. I'm not being automated to do these things or reminded if they have that divorce tag checked on them. So that's what that other condition means there. But yeah, so this is, another nice automation. A lot of people do something surrounding anniversaries or birth dates because you can collect those and link them to their profiles there. That and the client portal, I would say, is another big one. If you haven't explored the client portal yet, it is a great little feature you can use to allow your clients to log in to their own little database, I guess if you want to call it that, of all of their documents. So things like questionnaires that are outstanding for them to fill out, their contract they've signed with you, their invoices, all of their history with you is all in their personal client portal. So what I do, and this is actually where we were talking earlier about mistakes that I kind of learned the hard way through automations, is what I do is I observe me countersigning their contract by observing contract, studio, accepted, and signed here. And I have it run immediately because what I like to do is I make sure I first have their retainer. So once I have their retainer payment, I then countersign their contract. And that's when I kind of consider them officially booked. So I have their portal email not trigger until I consider them booked by me countersigning that contract. So what this does is it looks at me countersigning a contract, specifically only on weddings, because I have slightly different language, just like everything else. I have a lot of automations that are wedding specific, and then I have some that are portrait specific or photo booth specific. So I have conditions here for the job type must be wedding. Then I have, and this is important, anytime, any automation that you are triggering based on a contract being signed, whether it's the client signing it or you signing it, it's so important to include one or more conditions that help tailor it to exactly the contract template you want to trigger that automation. And here's why. For example, I originally had this set up as to run for when I countersigned a contract on a wedding job. So I just had that first condition originally. And I thought, okay, this is great, and it was working fine. And what this email does, which I'll show the email in a second, but what this email does is it introduces them to their portal and says, welcome, you're now a client of mine. Here's your client portal where you can get all these documents and blah, 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 all the introductory nice stuff. Well, then I wasn't thinking about, oh my God, what if I have a wedding that cancels one day? And then I had my first wedding cancellation. And it was because they had called off their wedding. So when I created a cancellation contract template in my account, I wasn't thinking that when I countersign that contract, it's going to trigger this email. So that's exactly what happened. The bride received, actually the bride and the groom got this email from me. And it was like one of those, welcome, I'm so excited for your wedding. And really, obviously their wedding wasn't happening. So it was a little awkward, and I immediately caught it, and I emailed her back and I was like, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to send that. So one of those learning moments. So now I like to stress that to everybody else. Whenever you're observing a contract being signed, the easiest fail-safe method is to have it tell it exactly which contract template you want to trigger this email. So this way, if the language of your cancellation agreement, or say, a great example of this also is actually second shooter agreements. If you do send your team members, whether it's a second photographer, a second videographer, assistant, somebody on your jobs, if you send your team members their own contracts, you don't want it going to the client, or you don't want
know anybody who's done that.
Yeah, you don't want the follow-up email that you're sending with this automation to go to the wrong people.
No idea what you're talking
So the
about.
best way to do this is to have this exact condition in there that says item name must exactly match blank. So in this case, I only want this portal email to go out to my clients whenever the contract that I'm countersigning is called NKP wedding contract, because that's what I have my template called in my contract template list. So that's the best way to ensure that the correct contract signature is triggering it. And then this way, like I said before, you can duplicate this automation. So if you have a very similar thing you want to happen after you countersign maybe a cancellation agreement, maybe you want a confirmation of your cancellation agreement with a link to it to go out to them for their records. You can have a similar setup. You can duplicate this, but instead change the condition to be must exactly match, wedding cancellation agreement or whatever you call it. Also keep that in mind though, if you do change around your contract templates and change their names, you're going to need to always be checking on your automations and making sure you're making those same changes there. But little tip. As for the action here, this is sending an email immediately. And this is one of those ones I actually don't draft. I actually just have it go because it's always something I want to send. I never need to personalize this. And what this email basically says is I have it go to partner A, who is whoever my main client is for a couple. And then it CCs partner B. So they also get a copy, but they see that their fiance has also received it. It introduces them to their, what I call the client lounge, which is the client portal, but it just introduces them to that. The main thing for the client portal is including a token in there, a portal token. We typically recommend using the recipient portal linked token there because that automatically each recipient will get a link to their own portal there. What I actually do for weddings is I use the token for my partner A job role. So it's partner A portal linked is the token. So every role has their own token like that. But the key to that is, since the client portal is client-based, not job-based, I want to make sure that if, say the partner B is a groom, I want to make sure that when he clicks on that link, which turns into the words client portal, that it takes him to the same portal that his fiance is seeing. So they both can only log into that one portal and set their password.
Right.
So that's why I do that, just in case anybody's looking at that and
That's
saying,
smart.
like, why is she using a different token? So also a nice little tip there. But yeah, so that's how I introduce clients to the portal. But it also gives you an understanding of how to trigger things to happen upon you signing the contract. So a lot of people who want certain things to happen upon booking will do this instead of observing the job reaching the booked stage, because they want to make sure they've received their retainer. They technically consider them booked and
Yes.
they're paid.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to automate other things as well after booking. So nice little tip there. I'm trying to think of any other.
This is giving me ideas for things to do.
Yeah.
I've got like an ongoing, as
Just
per
like last
usual, I have an ongoing list of, I'm like, ooh, you know what I need to write?
Yeah, build automation building. Yeah, so I would say those are kind of the biggest, most common things that I feel like people of all different industries, different businesses
Which is great,
can use, and
Because
they're
those are
common.
common things.
Yeah.
But what starts to make things special are the special requests that end up being freaking
Amazing.
life changers, such
Yeah.
as my week of email, which I automate now based on responses to questionnaires and Instagram and the things that we're going to get into. The things that when you really settle in and you think, you know what? This is so complicated and I do this every single wedding. There's got to be an easier way to do this. And then smart brains, hers, build them and the rest of us can benefit from them.
Yeah.
Or those of us less well-versed, take a hack at it and then you fix it. Can I ask you a quick question before we move on though? In the portal, will it have invoices directed to just that specific person? For example, what if the bride has a boudoir session scheduled? Will the groom see her invoice on his portal?
So for something like that, the portal it's client specific. So technically that invoice would be in her portal, and the wedding stuff will be in, hypothetically, her portal if she's the one that is like your main point person. So yeah, the boudoir thing is definitely one of those situations where you want to be careful, and maybe tell her, like, don't let your fiance know about the portal, or I don't know, find maybe another little way to hide that, because if he does log in to her portal, he will see her order for that, because it's her portal. So it does go based on the contact, not their job. Right. So everything tied to her will be in that portal, in her portal. So
makes sense.
So yeah, that's kind of how that setup is. So yeah, some personal things. I mean, are there any other like little questions or anything people
No,
have
for the
that
most
are
part, people have just
pressing?
been squealing, lots of squealing.
Okay, good, good,
Yes,
good, good.
you also changed Zophia's life just a little bit.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Goals. So my personal things, and we'll go into Susan's as well, like some fun stuff that we automate beyond the ordinary. I guess I'll go with start a little bit slower and then go into crazy, but I would say we talked about the console and pre-wedding
Yes.
meeting reminders, things like that. The thank you thing is one of those things that I feel like some people don't typically think of, so I do that as well.
I forget. Like, I need to actually go in and build these automations to draft them, because a lot of times I'll go have a meeting at night and then I'll go home and I have to get my kids dinner and I have to like do all this other stuff, and then I think I need to email these people first thing tomorrow morning and tell them thank you, and then I forget.
Yeah.
So if I woke up the next morning and I'm like, well, what are all of these drafts here for? I'd be like, oh crap, that thing that I
Yeah.
did not do. Zofia said she's still squealing. I love her.
Awesome. So yeah, one other thing I do, actually in relation to the actual booking for a wedding, is I like to thank the referral. So of course, as part of my contact forms, I do ask like how people find me, what their lead source is, and I give them certain options to choose from there, from my lead sources list in my settings. However, I also have a custom field that is just a text field, and it asks if somebody in particular referred you, or a certain magazine or a certain website, a certain friend or family member referred you to me, put their name here. And so it's optional, so not everybody, of course, puts something in there. They may not have found me through somebody in particular. But what that helps me do is, if it is somebody that I do know, like a past client of mine, I will add that contact on the job as a referral. So I have a referral job role in my job roles list, and I will assign that contact, that existing contact, and I usually have their email address, especially if it's a past client, and I will assign them to the referral job role on the contact list for the wedding. So what I have here, actually let me delete that, that's not even needed there. So in my automation setup here for my referral notification for weddings, it looks at the job getting booked. So in this case, I have a condition like before, that the job type must exactly match wedding. And I have this email go out 7 days after, because I like to just kind of make sure they're officially booked, nothing's changed, they're in there. And this is set up to send, as we talked about earlier, you can send emails specifically to a certain job role on the job. So I have this automatically go to the referral job role. So this will only happen if there's actually somebody on the wedding's
Like an actual
contact list,
person.
yeah,
Okay.
that has an email address and their role is referral. So it's just like an easy thing to do. I only had to set this up once. I basically do like a little reward program kind of to thank people. But even if you're just sending just a generic thank you, like thanks for referring me to this couple, they've officially booked me or whatever. It's a great little easy thing to automate that makes people happy. But the key here is if you want to even make it super personalized, obviously it'll pull in their name, but it will also, you can pull in the names of the people they referred you to by using the job clients token there, like I have. So this way, it'll say, thank you so much for referring me to, these two people, or whatever the names are of the couple on
That's
the wedding.
really cool.
So yeah, it's a nice simple thing to do. Something, whether you have any kind of reward program or not, if you just like to give somebody a nice little thank you.
And again, this is a lovely little thank you that, yes, you could take a couple minutes out of your day and you could write it, but it would be a couple extra minutes out of your day to write it. It's lovely if it just popped right on out of there.
Yeah,
Go
no,
for
for
it.
sure.
Power.
So that's referrals, which is a great thing to track in general. So even if you don't send them a thank you email, I know some other people have asked how I track who refers me to who. And it's a great way just to be able to pull up that contact's name in your address book and see all the jobs that they've actually referred you to. Even if you wanted to send them like a nice little thank you and or something special if they're a really good past client. So that's one thing I automate. Things like, what's another one? So for weddings specifically, I have an automation that sends my clients hair and makeup recommendations for their engagement session. So that is done by actually observing a certain task. Let me see here. Let me find my automation. So as we talked about earlier, you can observe tasks being completed. And this is great because you can have one task trigger multiple things to happen with an automation. So in this case, I have this automation set up that as soon as a certain task gets completed by me, it will, in this case, it actually adds another task due a week later. I think I'm going to later on go home and change this to actually send. Actually, you know what? I'll do it right now. Why not?
This is crazy. You're just doing it.
Why not? Because I have the email template anyway. So basically what I want to do here is I have a certain task in my wedding workflow that at a certain time frame, and it doesn't have a due date to it, but basically I have a task that is called e-session scheduled before reminder email. Because I have a task that I think about 9 months or 6 months before their wedding, I want to make sure I don't forget to like get their engagement session scheduled if they have one. So this is on my engagement session deliverable workflow. So this condition here tells me that whenever I check off this specific task, so this condition says item name, which is the task name, since I'm observing a task being completed, it's saying the item name must exactly match this. So this will only run whenever I check off that task on a job. That's how you target the specific task. Otherwise, if you don't have a condition here, this automation is going to run every time you check off any task, which you don't want.
No.
This is what I currently have it set up to do, which is to add another task to be due later on. So just so I can show you what that looks like when it comes to adding a task, since we haven't talked about that yet. This is how you would do that. You would choose the add task option, make it due whatever time frame you want. The time frame here does need to be in relation to the day or the time you're checking off that task. So it's not in relation to the wedding date or to something else. So in this case, I had it due 1 week later. So as soon as I check off that task, 1 week later, it's going to actually create this new task, which is what I was doing. We're changing that. But you can tell it who to assign it to. So in your account, if you have a certain employee, a certain user on your account that takes care of this new task you're creating, you can choose that here. So by default, it'll always assign it to that person. The task list name is also where you need to tell it where to add that task to. So in my case, my engagement session product is called complimentary engagement session. And so when somebody books that as part of their booking, it creates the deliverable workflow under that task list name of complimentary engagement session. So that's where I had this task getting added due 1 week later. So now in this case, if instead of adding that second task, because when that task comes up, I'm just going to be emailing them anyway, if I wanted to instead email them the actual recommendation email for vendors, I would choose send email. And I can actually do send immediately. I can send it, so over many minutes later or whatever. So I could do, say, send immediately, change it to clients here, or maybe actually I would do partner A, because hair and makeup, I'll do clients, just so they both get it. Especially because this isn't really gender specific. So do clients. And then here's where I would choose, if I already have an email template for this, I would just choose it here. So I have one here. It's called engagement session preparing, session already scheduled. So that's how I would, instead of creating that task to be due a week later, I can instead just pre-schedule that email to go out or draft it, and then maybe just schedule it for a few days from now or or whatever.
That's really cool.
So yeah, that's one little tip. So things like that, this is a good example of, I think, what we talked about in the beginning is why you may have something automated versus just in your workflow, because you don't know when somebody's going to schedule their engagement session. And you don't want to have all these tasks that are due so many months or weeks or whatever before a wedding that you have to keep, pushing the date off or changing the due date of the task. Instead, you can have one task that you check as completed when something happens, and it can trigger, a number of things. So that's one little example there with for engagement sessions. Engagement sessions in general, I do automate some other things in relation to engagement sessions. So things like, let's see, confirmations. So I actually do have that same task that we were just checking out. I have another automation that happens at the time that that's completed, and that's basically just a confirmation email. So when a couple is ready to schedule their engagement session, we go over the date and time, location. I put it on the calendar on the job using my engagement session event type, and then I check off this task here that's called engagement session scheduled, and it has in parentheses drafts email confirmation, because that's my internal way of remembering that when I check this off, it's going to do something with automations. So yeah, as soon as I schedule an engagement session with a couple, I check that off, and it pre-schedules this, or it drafts this email. And it just says your engagement session has been scheduled. It has just the details, like the date, location, time, and I just kind of say, like, make sure it's on your calendar, and I just, just remind them. So that's a nice little tip.
Not leaning over here and taking a picture of your screen right now.
Go for it. Yeah.
This is whenever you add. So sometimes I have an engagement session that is for a wedding client. Sometimes I have an engagement session that is for a non-wedding client.
Yes.
This is any time you add an engagement session to anyone's schedule.
Well, it's triggering based on a task being completed. So I have a task in my engagement session.
Can you trigger
deliverable
it based on creating an event?
Technically, no.
that's
There isn't a way
too-
to observe the saving of a new event on the calendar. We do have a feature request for that.
So
But
I would just need to...
just to have a task with no due date that's in the workflow so that you check it off. So actually, if I go...
So if it has no due date, you just go to the client thing and then...
Yeah, on their job, you just check it.
Great.
So if I go to actually my workflows here, just to show a quick example.
I immediately just got a text from Charmy that said, send me that picture.
Not surprised.
So you literally just put that in your...
In my deliverable workflow for engagement sessions.
That's hot.
So I have here, I have two things that have no due dates. So that one here that we were just talking about is this one that says engagement session scheduled, drafts email confirmation.
So it would be this engagement session workflow, which
Yep.
is going to happen
Anytime
whether they've added one to their thing, whether they've booked one separately.
as long as you have it, as long as you have your engagement session deliverable workflow tied to, an engagement session product.
And then you just give it no
No due date.
due date.
Because that's something that you never know when that's going to happen. So I just have it as part of my workflow, just like everything really with Tave or any studio management system, is kind of just making, either using your current workflow and tweaking it a bit, but making these things just part of your habits. You kind of just make it part of your workflow for your clients. So as soon as I check that off on any of my jobs, it will draft that email for me. And then I just go in there and
That's amazing.
and check it off. So actually, because I'm in a test mode here,
Yes.
ooh,
do it.
let me just pull up one and I'll show you how exactly it works. So if I go to one of my weddings that's coming up that definitely hasn't scheduled their engagement session yet, let's see who we have here. Things in our little test database. Going a little little slower. So I'll get that to load. But you could do other things, not even tied to this task of scheduling an engagement session, but you could do other things just in relation to engagement sessions in general. So one good example of that is actually just engagement session tips. So I know a lot of people like to share, like, here's my engagement session guide, and like, here's some tips on wardrobe, and
as if I wasn't excited enough before.
things like that you want to send to people only in relation to a certain session coming up, like an engagement session. So similar to what we talked about earlier, you can observe the certain session on the calendar. So you're going to observe calendar session, tell it that you want in a condition to observe only for engagement sessions. And then it will trigger that email. So the engagement session tips, or wardrobe things. I do things like that for weddings all the time. So things like I just started recently actually, sending something about covering bridal showers. Just kind of saying like 4 months out, like, hey, have you thought about having your bridal shower covered?
I do that
I
now
offer
for
that.
rehearsal dinners.
Yeah, that's a great, things like that, like ways that maybe you can make extra little money by just having this email go out. You don't have to remember
mine is based on a task where if I click, do I want to offer them rehearsal dinner coverage? If I click yes on the task, it automatically sends an email that says rehearsal dinner coverage is usually X amount. I could offer it to you for Y amount. But if I'm booked the day of the rehearsal, or if I just don't want to do it,
you don't want to do it.
I just delete the task.
Yeah, so that's the trick actually, and I know that question probably would come up in general is if you have something that is observing a task being completed and you don't want to even ever complete that task for a certain job, because you don't want those things triggering.
Do that thing.
Yeah. You could just, to avoid that, because of course eventually you want your entire job to have no tasks left and be completed.
Right.
The key thing is to just delete the task. So whenever you hover over a task, you'll see the options to edit or delete. So in that case, you want to delete. So going into the engagement session thing, just to show you guys, I pulled up a wedding here that's coming up next year. They have an engagement session booked with me. So they have in their tasks here, they have the complimentary engagement session task list, because that is tied to the engagement session on their order. So if they had scheduled their engagement session with me, what I would normally do is I would go to their schedule and I would add that engagement session. So whatever we talked about. So say I add in here, let's see, engagement session. And then I would pop in the date. Say we pull a random day here and pull a random location.
2 in the afternoon, that light's gonna be crap.
Oh yeah. Unless it's December.
True.
So I'm gonna add this here, save and continue. So now on their schedule, I now have this engagement session for June 30th. So I would go to their tasks and check off that task we talked about. So here, engagement session scheduled, drafts email confirmation. When I check that off, it completes that task, so it's no longer there for me to worry about.
So it doesn't automatically send it, it just drafts it.
I have it drafted, I'm pretty sure. We'll find out in a second here. So I'm pretty sure I have it drafted. So when I click, when I go back to their mail tab now, because that automation ran for me, I go back to the mail tab on their job and that email is there. Your engagement session has been scheduled. It's saved as a draft. So I can pop in here, just double check. I can preview the email before I send it. It pulls in all the information, shows me what it's going to look like.
Icons down at the bottom of your email signature.
Yeah, I have the little social media icons that link to my things, and they're all branded. I can show you that. Yep.
Do you want to see how she did that? Because I would like to see how she did that.
I forgot the website.
An automation, but I'd like to know.
I have it. I have it in there somewhere. I bookmarked the page. But yeah, so now I could send this off. The other nice thing about drafts, as I mentioned earlier, and the reason I draft a lot of my automated emails, is when I go to my dashboard here, I now see.
Oh, hang on.
Oh.
If you check the main completed task, will it automatically Oh, it will. I know this. I know the answer to this one. If you check the main completed task, will it automatically check all of the subtasks?
No, I think we changed that.
You changed it? So he says, so let's say I forgot to delete a task that I don't want to run and I click the main completed tasks. Will it check off that subtask?
So let me check off. I'll just show you a quick example.
It looks like it does, doesn't it?
Well, when you pop in here, when you click at the actual link, it doesn't.
Oh, so you can say,
Yeah, we changed
I'm
that.
done with this task list, but it's not going to
Ignore the
automatically
rest.
check.
Yeah, it doesn't check them all.
There you go,
Yeah,
Michael.
we did change that a bit ago now, but we did change that because of things like people wanting to get rid of all their tasks so they can complete a job. So we changed it so that it doesn't check off everything when you check off the task list. And same thing with actually completing a job. So it used to be, a long time ago, used to be that when you would complete a job manually by clicking on the completed stage,
It would click
it
all of
would
your...
complete all your tasks, and we
Oh,
changed
no.
that as well.
So if anything was tied to an automation
Yes.
or an email,
So that's
you
why
just
we
screwed
stopped.
yourself.
We did change both of those things a bit ago as a precaution because so many people do automate things in relation to tasks being completed, and we didn't want that happening any longer. So yeah, you're good there. Going back to the drafting of emails, and this is why during our wedding school guide, I forget which video we talked about this in. I think it was like the reports and sidebar reports when we went into all of that, as well as actually I think the first video when we talked about the dashboard. You can have your own tiles, these squares up at the top of your dashboard in what we call the Right Now widget. One thing I would have you guys all do while you're looking at this is you're going to go into your dashboard, configure dashboard. In the Right Now widget, wherever you have that placed, most people have it up in the top left or the top right. In the Right Now widget, you want to make sure that you have your drafts sidebar list as one of your Right Now widgets. So if you don't,
Oh, I do.
mail drafts. Yeah.
So I got really concerned for just a second.
If you don't, you can go right here where you can add in new ones, and you can just search for it there because when you when you first create your account, in the email section of the sidebar, there should by default be a draft list for you. So making sure you have this in your Right Now widget is important because now that I have one draft currently in my account outstanding, it shows a tile here. So this is my best safeguard for a lot of these emails that I automate that, like I said earlier, I want to just double check. I want to make sure that things are right before I send it. I sometimes want to add additional details. The way I am always aware of them is because I have that tile here. So when I click there on that little tile, I see that same email that we just drafted by automation. And now if I send this off, it's no longer a draft, it's now sent. And now when I go back to my dashboard, that draft tile is no longer here. So that is definitely a big tip. If you don't already have the drafts there, definitely add it. You may find out you have a lot of draft emails that you didn't mean to create that you could probably delete. But that is key if you are using automations to draft emails for you rather than send immediately. So definitely do that. Okay, so going back, where were we? So yeah, that's engagement session things. Like I said, you can observe the engagement session itself or the wedding day or a photo booth coverage. I actually do that for my photo booth. I do send tips to my clients like I think a week or 10 days before their photo booth event. Let's see here. Where is that? Photo booth, 2-week reminder, drafted to clients. Same exact scenario as the engagement session. In this case, I'm just observing a session on the calendar and telling it 2 weeks before I want this to run, but only if the session's name must exactly match photo booth service. And that's the event type I have for my photo booth events. So this will only run 2 weeks before I have a photo booth service event on the calendar. So it runs 2 weeks before around 8 a.m. And again, it just creates a draft email for me that pulls in important tips that I have in that email template for their photo booth. So same thing goes for any kind of event or project or job that you have, if you have tips or just anything you want them to get before or after, that's a great way to do it. When it comes to observing calendar events like sessions, calls, and meetings, a good thing to know is Tave will only run these automations if the event is confirmed. So that's a big thing too.
I learned that the hard way.
So you want to make sure when you're adding events manually, in the case that you are adding something like an engagement session that they schedule, you want to make sure you confirm it once they've confirmed it.
Not showing up on my schedule because I never confirmed them.
Yeah, if you only get a calendar feed that just has confirmed events, you're not going to see things that aren't marked as confirmed. So I always, say make sure once you've set those dates and times with the client for a certain event, make sure it's confirmed, because automations won't run on it if it's not, which is a good thing. You don't want, emails going to leads about their wedding that you're not shooting. So just a little tip there to make sure that you're always confirming things on the event schedule there. So that is, let's see, what else is there? I know you and I have, I think, a similar automation or something that we do with our wedding questionnaires, our favorite questionnaire, the wedding prep questionnaire. Basically, you can automate things to happen based on their responses to different things.
This is
huge. This
is the sexiest thing to happen to my business in a very long time.
Yeah, we got your questionnaire.
My questionnaire is freaking awesome.
Much better. So a good example, so let me see here. I have, actually, let me go back. So I have an automation that looks at their wedding prep questionnaire coming in. And just so you know, when you're observing a questionnaire being submitted by the client, and it says here in parentheses, but just as like a little tip, it'll only run automations that observe this the first time they submit the questionnaire online. So when you send them the direct link to their questionnaire, Tave will look at it and trigger these automations if it applies, but only if it's the first time they're submitting it online specifically. So if say a bride fills out your questionnaire and it comes back to it later and fills out again, changes things, whatever, just so you know, these automations will only run the first time it comes through. But what's really cool about this, or even, I don't even have to even observe a questionnaire coming in. In this case, I could even be looking at the wedding date coming up in a few months or something. But just as an example, you can observe a questionnaire coming in, and then you can tell it which questionnaire you want to observe. So just like before, you would have an item name condition here. So it says item name must exactly match wedding prep questionnaire. That's the name of the long questionnaire I sent to my clients 4 months before a wedding by automation again. But then I have a question in there that asks if they want to do a first look or not. Similar, I think, to your example, I also have a questionnaire that asks if their venue needs me to have insurance.
Does your venue require a certificate of insurance?
Because that's something you need to know.
Because if I don't ask you, you're going to tell me 48 hours before your event, and then Hill and Usher is going to want to kill me.
Exactly. So I actually have another automation that looks at that same thing. So basically, in this case, for first looks, this is something good. Actually, another Tave user inspired me to actually do this myself, and I showed him how to do it in his account. But basically, I have a custom field in my account. It's a drop-down field, and it's related to their first look, and it asks, do you want to do a first look? It gives them 3 options. It says, like, yes, we definitely do, no, we don't, or we need help deciding. So I have this automation set up that if they have chosen we need help deciding, then it triggers a task to be added on their job that reminds me to share information. I have an email template that kind of promotes first looks, or really doesn't even promote it. It just tells them what a first look is like and helps them, give them some pros and cons of doing one or not doing one, so they can decide, what they're interested in there. So, so in this case, I have that task added. Of course, just like before, I probably could just instead draft an email to them about that exact email that I'm going to be sending 3 days later anyway. So again, I could still fine tune this more, but you can do things like that, which is really, really powerful. The ability to observe very specific answers in a questionnaire is so helpful for things like this. Same thing, proof of insurance.
So what my questionnaire has done, while you find it, what my questionnaire has done for me is every single answer to everything that anyone fills out on the wedding day worksheet is tied to some form of token, either a custom token or an existing token. And then it just starts talking to itself. It populates a schedule for me of the day that I can then go through and tweak, which then leads to my personal favorite automation, which is the week of
the
email.
Week of timeline, yeah. So here's mine to send. So I have 2 tasks that are actually built around this this question that I asked them that's linked to a different custom field on the proof of insurance. So I have that custom field, same thing, it's a drop down that says either yes or no, my venue doesn't require proof of insurance, or I have one that says we're not sure, but we'll find out, because 9 times out of 10, that's their answer. Usually they don't know if their venue requires it, unless, of course, the venue told them up front, like, we do need this and it's in their contract. But many venues don't really mention it up front. So what this actually does is when they fill that questionnaire out, it populates that custom field for me. And this specific automation, instead of observing the questionnaire coming in, instead, I'm mainly concerned with this closer to the wedding. So what I do is I have this automation observes the primary session, which is the wedding date, and 2 weeks before, it checks to see if that field, like what that custom field is set as on their worksheet. So if it has been set to either yes, that they do need proof of insurance, or that they're not sure, then this actually adds a task to remind me to send my certificate of insurance to the venue if it's required. So basically, I usually, in this scenario, I'll email the venue and ask them if it's required, and make sure I get that taken care of by that 2-week mark. It actually makes the task due immediately. Similar to that, I have a different one that at the same time, but I only want this to run if they say yes. 2 weeks before a wedding, it checks that same field, and if the answer is yes, that their venue definitely does require proof of insurance, I actually have a custom field on my contacts that is for proof of insurance is required for venues. So I have that actually update the venue contact, their address book. It updates that custom field in their address book to say, yes, that the proof of insurance is required. So this is exactly how I do that. So we haven't covered this really yet, but one of the actions that you can perform with an automation, like you said earlier, is updating fields. And this is a great example of that, where I want, based on a certain response that I have on the job worksheet, I want it to update that very specific field inside the venue contacts address book profile to say yes. And this is helpful for me so that I know down the line, if I shoot at that venue again, I know, okay, I've had to give them proof of insurance before. So I already just know, even if the client says we're not sure if we need it for this venue, I have in my records in the address book that they do, or at least they did the last time I worked there. So I'm pretty sure they do.
Ooh, that's a really good one.
So having that is super helpful. Again, one of those things that I literally added this sometime in the last 6 months, I think, this specific automation.
Really good.
So it's one of those things that like
That's
you kind of
really
learn,
good,
like
'cause
I need to maintain that data.
Well, sometimes clients are like, no, I don't think we need one. I'm like, yeah, you're at Ohika Castle. I've sent them like 72 by now. You need one.
Yeah.
We're going to get you one.
Yep.
Could you also hold on. Could you create an automation? Could you create a custom field in a contact that says requires COI, like for a venue? And then if that venue is added to a job, could you create an automation that triggers an automatic reminder? Or is that just is that just a ridiculous number of steps? Which it might be.
So what you could do, let me think here. you might be able to do that by, at a certain point before the wedding, hypothetically, you can have a condition. So it says, like, say job primary session 2 weeks before or a month before. And you may be able to have a condition that says, oh, actually, yes. So you could probably do it in 2 ways. One way that definitely should work is having a condition that says the jobs that the primary session, since that's what you're observing in this case, that the primary session's location contains
this custom field and it is checked.
well, it contains this name. So you can have one for specific venues if you want.
Yeah.
So a different automation for each venue. Or the other way I'm thinking that may work, and I'm not 100% positive on this, we'll have to check it out, is if you can have a condition that says the venue's custom, like it says venue.
So
like
Michael
this.
just said, how about have it just email the venue automatically? Like, I guess you could create an automation that
You could do that too.
emailed the venue itself and said, hey, do you
Is
need a
one
COI?
required? Yeah, you could totally do that. Like I said, you can kind of, in some cases, you can do as little or as much as you want with automations. So there are some, like I showed some of mine, where I was adding a task due a few days later, where instead I could have just sent the email by the automation instead of adding that task. It's kind of personal preference, and it depends on how immediate you want to do that thing.
Right.
So what I was envisioning before, let's see. Proof of insurance required. So this is what I was envisioning before. And this is not in the right automation, but just to go through with what Susan's question was you can have observing the primary session 2 weeks before, and I think this should work, that if you have a condition that says the venue's proof of insurance required field says yes, must exactly match yes, then you can have it trigger like a task due immediately, or updating a field on the job itself to also reflect that that custom field that I have. So yeah, you can get, there's probably a few workarounds to do something similar for sure. So yeah, so that's some other little tips and tricks with the questionnaires. First look is a good one that I do with that. Really any question, like any question in your questionnaire that is linked to a custom field that you have for data that you just is important to you to track, or it may result in you needing to take some other further steps. This is a great type of setup to do with an automation by observing a certain field's response at any given time to then trigger those reminders. Or you can email yourself or add a task like I have, or just send an email to somebody else, whatever the situation is. What else is there that's exciting? I would say when it comes to updating fields, I actually I do track all my gallery deliveries in here, which I think we talked about in the email template or the email video we did. So I do track all of my gallery deliveries here, their URLs, their gallery delivery dates, their expiration dates, their PIN numbers, all that stuff I track with custom fields in Tave. And what helps me with that is I have, like, for example, here's one for engagement sessions. I also have one for weddings. I have an automation that as soon as I check off a certain task that says that their images have been edited, it triggers 5 different actions.
Whoa.
So, and this is exactly how the setup is. So it observes a task being completed immediately. The task's name is edit engagement session images, and then in parentheses it says sets gallery dates. Because I like to just remind myself in my tasks that, you know, something's going to happen whenever I actually trigger, check this task as completed. And I also have a condition that the jobs type must exactly match wedding. And then I have these 5 things happen when I check off that one task. So it actually reminds me a week later, it adds a task for me to do something a week later, submit my images. It has another task that reminds me to move some files around on my hard drives, as well as drafting the actual gallery delivery email. I have a certain email template that I use specifically for engagement sessions that are being delivered. And then I have 2 fields that get updated. So I have, like I said before, gallery delivery and expiration date fields. And so that actually, these 2 fields set those, or these 2 actions set those dates in those fields for me. So here's an example of one of them. By using the word today in the value here, it actually will set the delivery date to that day. As soon as I check off that task, whatever that calendar date is, it will set that field for me. Same thing with the expiration. The other action there is to, my engagement sessions and my portrait sessions all expire 1 month from the date of delivery. So having this code here, today plus 1 month, actually Tave will calculate what that date is 1 month from today, and it'll populate that due date in there for me. And then I just replicate that same date when I'm setting up my shoe-proof gallery. I put that date in there and make sure it actually expires on that date. But this helps me, having those get set there, when I draft that email that delivers the gallery. I'll show you actually what that looks like. We went over these, I think, in email templates as well in that video. But, oh, actually, I don't even have it in here. Let me actually pull up the actual template. I have it in email templates. So gallery, delivery, engagement, in wedding. I'm actually going to just, oh, that's expiration. There we go. Engagement and wedding package. So this is the same one that gets triggered with this automation. But basically, this is what my email template looks like. And all of my gallery delivery emails look similar to
beautiful.
this. So it pulls in things like their link to their gallery. But also down here, the expiration, this is where I pull in the expiration date because that's set by Tave for me when I check off that I've edited their images and I'm delivering them. So that's where that comes into play, that custom field, as well as another email that I send later on, 3 weeks later, to give them a heads up that they have 1 more week before their gallery expires. That's another automation. It pulls in that date again to remind them with that token. So that's one of the benefits of using custom fields in general is you can refer to that data in several different email templates in different places. So gallery delivery, what else can we do here? Instagram is kind of the grand finale, I feel like, of my favorite automations. I would say we do have a support article on this on our support site. So if you search for Instagram there, or social media even, that tutorial should come up. And what this does, for those who haven't seen it already when either at workshops or just in talking to me through support, I have it here, wedding social media handles and hashtags.
Question before we dive into this. Can an item in a quote be automatically inputted into a custom field? For example, custom field is a text box as album type. The quote has an album called 12 by 12 album. Mm-hmm. Can the 12 by 12 album be automatically input into the custom field album type?
Yes.
That's the
you could definitely do that. I've had people, so you can't tell it with a token to pull in that exact token name or something, but what you would do in that case is you would have, say you offer 3 albums, so say 10 by 10, 12 by 12, 8 by 8 albums. And you can observe, one of the observables in an automation is order booked in client access. So as long as you're booking it online through like a quote and you're not manually booking it, you can actually observe the contents of that order and you can populate different things based on that. So for example, a great example for your question would be to have an automation that observes an order being booked. In the condition it says that the order must contain, or if the order contains, 12 by 12 album, say, you can have the action be to update a certain custom field that you have, like with a drop down, like album purchased or something. and you can have it update that field to say 12 by 12 album or whatever your options are. So yeah, you could definitely do that. And so in that case, you would have, if you have like 3 album styles you offer that you like to track in that custom field, you can have 3 different automations that are 100% the same, except for the numbers there, or the products there in the condition and in the action. So yeah, I've definitely seen people do things like that. I actually have an automation that sends, what do I do here? I know I do something for engagement sessions. I have, or for weddings that have an engagement session specifically. Let me see here. I also have some for my photo booth. Yeah, like I have, for example, I have a small print credit I include with my engagement sessions, only if it's part of a wedding. So I have an automation set up similar to how yours would be built in that situation, where it's observing sales order booked in client access. And the condition here is that the order's product summary, which I'll show you how this is built, it looks at the targeted orders that you're looking at, its product summary, and it says must contain the text, in my case, complimentary engagement session, because that's the name of my engagement session product that I offer with my wedding. So only when they book a wedding with me that has that complimentary engagement session in their package, I have Tave update a certain field. It updates a checkbox field for me to check it, saying that they have print credit. So that's a similar example to the albums. You could have instead, you can have an action that updates a drop-down field to a certain value of your choice based on what is ordered in that order, if that makes sense. So yes, that can be done. And if you have any questions setting that up, totally shoot us a support message and tell me what you're looking to do, and I can take a look and tell you if it is possible, how to generally do it.
Do you have
good question.
any automations for your own business that you have not set up that you want to? Like as a power user, as someone who knows this program inside
Something
and
that I
out,
would want to do that I haven't.
because I know like the whole like
there's a
shoemaker's
couple.
shoulder and have no shoes sort of thing. Like,
I mean,
hold on, Michael, you said does it have to be a drop down, not a text box?
oh no, it could be a text box.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The only reason I was thinking drop down is because I like in my own account for things that are very definite, like there's certain choices only, and to avoid like error typing something differently. If you want to report on it, so things like a custom field like that, you can actually report on in your sidebar reports.
Right.
So the ability to have a drop down where there's only like 3 set options, and you can always add options to it, but like very definite options, it makes it really clean for the reports to make sure that there's no error in like something being spelled differently or something. So
That makes sense.
So, but yes, you can do you can update a text box field as well, like that, yeah. But when it comes to like things that I would want to automate, really everything I think that I've ever thought of automating in my account that is possible to automate, I've done.
Yeah.
There are definitely some things that I wish I could automate, like observing a custom field specifically, because right now you can't observe a value in a custom field. So in my case, the key thing I would want to automate there is that gallery expiration date field. I would like to be able to trigger things based on that. Instead, I've done it a different way and it works, and honestly, it's totally fine. But for something like my weddings, that their gallery doesn't expire for a year, I would rather be able to observe that specific date and like trigger an email maybe a month before that, and then
Based on
a week
that-
before,
that-
based on that date triggering off the automation.
That would be pretty sweet.
I mean, it's one of those things that would be awesome. Is it a deal breaker? Definitely not. I have other ways of doing it. But really, almost everything I've ever thought of automating, I've done. I have, actually, I'm kind of lying. I do have in my tasks, in my general tasks, which if you're not using general tasks, you need to. That's where I kind of log, which when we talked about workflow and tasks and our other things, I have a column or a task list here. Oh my God, did I get rid of it?
Did you?
Maybe I did everything in it.
Did you do everything in your tasks list?
Wow, maybe I did get rid of it. I thought I had one in here that was called Things to Automate. Maybe I
What?
got rid of it. All right, cool. I guess I did. But
I have one in
at
here
one
called
point,
Things to Do Sometime.
there you go. I had in the general tasks, which is an awesome place in general to put just tasks that you need to do for your business, for your website, for just things that aren't job specific or client specific. It's what I call like my virtual Post-it note. So everything that used to be on Post-it notes all over my desk or a notepad somewhere that I would never look at, I have in lists in my general tasks. Things like tax due dates are in there. Things like website ideas. One thing I had in there that I thought was still in there, but I must have checked everything off on there, even though I could think of something I think that I would want to do, is I had one called Things to Automate. So literally, as you guys are taking notes watching this, you could be jotting down things that you may want to eventually do in your Tave account and just stick them in a list like that in your general tasks. So you don't lose them, you don't forget where they are.
And I made a big note, and if I don't take this note and go put it somewhere,
Yep.
it's not ever going to happen. If it's not in Tave,
Yep.
if it's not in my Airtable, or it's not written down in my actual notebook, I'm never going to look at it again.
Yeah, exactly.
I have hundreds of notes in here, and I have no idea what any of them are about.
Yep, exactly. So with the general tasks, one nice thing too is you can set due dates on them, so they'll pop up on your dashboard. But what I was kind of getting at there originally was I had a task list called Things to Automate in Tave. And so I forget where I was inspired, probably at a workshop that I taught or something, where I was like, oh, I would love to automate this. And actually one of the examples, now that I think about it, is the whole bridal shower thing. I wanted to make sure I reached out to clients so many months before a wedding and proposed the idea of shooting their bridal shower. It was one of those things that the idea came to me talking to somebody, and I was like, oh, I should just automate that in Tave. And so I sat down one day, I saw that task come up on my to-dos, and I made it an automation. I checked off the task, and now it's gone. But that actually kind of, in a way, leads me into my Instagram automation, which was actually inspired by you at WPPI like 3 years ago now, because I remember you were talking about how in preparation for every wedding, you have in like your notes app, you would have like a note for every wedding, and that's where you would keep notes on the vendors involved and
it
Instagram
was not
handles.
But it was the best way to do it at the time.
Yeah, and so that's what I took that idea, listening to that, I was like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. So now I can easily just copy and paste as I do posts in Instagram, copy and paste those notes and those hashtags and handles for that wedding from my notes app. But then I literally went back home from Vegas and I was like,
I can improve upon this, but I'm never going to tell her how I did it.
I could actually maybe automate that. I could have something in Tave do that for me. And so I came up with a system, which, as I kind of mentioned before, is we do have a support article that covers this, how to do it. But it involves having an automation here that the day before a wedding, it sends me a whole blurb of all of the handles and hashtags for the vendors involved in the wedding. So here it observes primary session the day before, only runs for my weddings. And this is what that crazy email looks like. Right now, I used to have it email to myself, and then I would copy and paste it into an Apple Note. I've since changed that because I started using Evernote for this.
Evernote's really great.
I just like it better than the Apple Note thing.
So wait, it sends to your Evernote.
It sends it to my Evernote because with Evernote, you
okay.
can have your own dedicated Evernote email address that can create notes in notebooks in Evernote.
And that's what I use to hold all of my receipts for everything. Whenever I get a receipt online,
you can do
for anything I buy, I forward
email it right
my,
to there.
Off it goes.
Yeah, so there is a structure. If you're not familiar with Evernote, there's a structure. They tell you how to name the subject line of the email to make it go to the appropriate notebook and tell it how to name the note in the notebook. So that's why this title is a little weird. Basically, this tells it to use the partner B's last name and the word wedding as the note title. And by using this @wedding hashtags, that tells it which notebook in my Evernote account, which is called wedding hashtags, to put it in. So the day before a wedding, say it's the Johnson wedding, it'll put a note with just this text that's in this body here into my Evernote notebook that's called wedding hashtags, and it'll call the note Johnson wedding. So that's how that naming structure works. But like I said, you can also just email it directly to yourself. So there's an option when emailing in an automation to send to a specific email address. And so this used to just be my business email, and I would send these to myself a day before. So if you don't use Evernote, you can send it to yourself like that. And what this crazy email does is this is full of custom field and Instagram handle tokens for all the possible vendors on my weddings.
Oh God.
So it pulls in.
Sorry, I'm literally crawling. You can't see it over here. I'm literally like, show me all of this, like in her lap.
So yeah, so you can pull all of this in because if you don't already know, on your address book profiles, you can track Instagram handles. But then you'll see here these custom ones. So photo booth, custom wedding vendor hashtags, bakery, custom wedding vendor hashtags, venue, florist, all of these. I have a custom wedding vendor hashtag field. It's a text field, and it's on my contacts. And so what I do as part of my wedding workflow, I have a task that reminds me, I think sometime the week of the wedding, I think a few days before the wedding, it reminds me to make sure my all of the vendors on the job all their social media information is on their profiles. So what I do, it takes me 5 minutes for an average wedding, especially because I've worked with some of the vendors before.
I'm putting this in my workflow right
Yeah, pull up
now.
the article on the support site for
Hold
sure. So you can, so I pop their information in, I look them up on Instagram, I come up with hashtags that I think may lead brides to find.
I'm dropping this in the chat box.
Yes,
by the way.
yeah, put that in there. So
okay, sorry.
Yeah, Charmy does
screaming
this.
in capital letters. I do this because of Nicole. It is a maze.
Yeah,
she can't even
I taught her how to do it. So of course you have to create the custom field, which I explain how to do this in the Instagram support article tutorial, and I even give you my exact blurb, obviously without my personal hashtags in the beginning, but basically, I give you the exact instructions, including this text of what to put into your body of your email. Of course, you're going to change some things. So you're going to change, if you're using different job roles than I use, you're going to have to swap them out. Mm-hmm. But you get the gist of what the style looks like. And then what happens is 2 days before a wedding, this gets sent from Tave to my Evernote. And then it's there, and the very first time I post for that wedding, I will copy this, of course, and clean it up if I need to, because in case there isn't a videographer or there isn't a certain job role involved in their wedding, then maybe something might be blank, there may be some extra spaces, and I just want to clean it up. So I clean it up the first time I go to use it. And then after that, I have that blurb ready to go to put below all my captions for every time I post that wedding, something from that wedding. And so this helps with my pre-scheduling I do with Planoly. And
holy moly, I'm putting this on
it's my favorite automation. It's like my baby that I share with everybody. So we do have a support article. Like I said, go to help.tave.com.
I dropped it for those of you who are watching it later.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are watching it now,
It's in the
Yeah.
chat there. But if you just search for Instagram there or social media, you'll see the support article that walks you through exactly how I set it up, gives you even that blurb, like I said, to then
Can this be
adjust.
posted to the notes section inside Tave?
It can't post to the notes tab because there isn't a way to link to there, like with tokens or anything. It's not a field to update. Technically, you could update a custom field. Oh, actually, no. No, that wouldn't work because you can't use tokens in the action of updating into a field, into another field. So currently the best way to use this would be to email it outgoing because then that's when the tokens get populated
Yes.
upon the email being created and sent. So currently that would be the best way to do it. I do know we do have the feature request on file for the ability to use existing tokens to then tell another field what to have in it, which is what you're looking to do.
Right.
But yeah, so definitely write in and request that, and we'll get you get your vote on there. But so yeah, currently the best way to send something like this out is by email.
This just changed my life. This is so good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It really is. It's amazing. That's usually at workshops when people are like, "How the hell did you think of that?"
I like that she's sitting over here like
It's awesome.
all proud of herself.
Yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. It saves me so much time, and honestly, as much as people look at that and they get nervous, they're like, it's going to take forever to do that
It's
work.
not, though.
But it doesn't.
It's
It
not.
really takes 5 minutes for every wedding, and it's because it's just part of my workflow. It's a task in my workflow. And like I mentioned earlier, usually most wedding photographers, you end up working with a lot of the same venues a lot.
Yep.
A lot of the same hairstylists, same florists. So a lot of times you already
information will
have.
keep.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
that information.
Yeah.
So I literally have a task on my workflow that says update all vendor social media. And I hit command and click on each of them in the job contact list, pop them all up in my browser, and just make sure that they're filled in. If they're not, I look them up. It literally takes like 5 minutes on
it's
an average
like
wedding.
When
And it gets me vendors that love me
yeah,
on
when
Instagram.
when I get
like,
my
love it.
questionnaire back and it populates all of my events for the day, it takes me 5 minutes to go through and double check the times and details on those events.
Yep.
It's much faster than doing this. If I have to spend 5 minutes making sure I've got all those social media handles, that's 5 minutes that I didn't spend for this wedding writing them all down custom and then having to do it again the next wedding and then having
Yep.
to do it again the next wedding. And eventually, as you build up your database of places you work and vendors you work with over and
Yeah,
over and
it's
over again,
just-
you'll be doing less and less and
Oh,
less.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. It probably takes me less than 5 minutes for a lot of my local weddings that are in my area that I've worked with most of those vendors like 15 times.
And some of them you can look at it and be like, oh, I don't need to look this person up.
Yeah.
I know their info.
Yeah,
It's already in there.
So it's definitely my favorite. And you know, when you use something to plan out your Instagram, it's even cooler because you literally can just plan things out all at once and copy paste. It ensures that you're tagging every single vendor, at least that you've found on Instagram, anybody who's on there,
It's really
and giving them
amazing.
credit. Which they then love and usually will repost stuff.
And it's every vendor, even kind of like the little obscure ones.
Oh,
because
everything down to who did the invitations.
I forget all the time the little vendors. Like, oh, it was Mike's Limo Company.
Yeah,
Like literally.
transportation, jeweler. I even ask them for their jewelers. I mean, I don't ask
Oh,
them for
that's smart.
for their Instagram, but I collect as part of my wedding questionnaire, which we definitely touch on in the questionnaire video.
Mm-hmm.
But in that wedding questionnaire, I ask for like every little thing. But part of that, of course, is all their vendors. So
Yeah.
I ask them for everything from their florist to who did the invitations, who made the dresses, where
did
they
you
got the
buy your
suits
dress?
from,
Yeah.
the shops, jewelers, invitations, like I said, and even if there's like I even have a job role in my account for other rental company,
Yeah.
because sometimes they maybe rented their arbor from a company, and I want to give them credit. Or I've had people that do cigar bars, cigar rollers during their cocktail hour, and I want to file them in the job contacts and make sure they get credit. And they love it. Yeah, it's definitely my favorite thing I've automated.
Yeah, it's pretty great, not gonna lie.
Those are kind of my personal favorites that I do. I've got a whole bunch. I'm actually in Airtable, we were talking about this earlier, I'm starting to actually transfer my automations into a database so I can kind of see how, like what I automate, how they're built, and possibly maybe one day share that with people. It'll be easier to kind of hand over a spreadsheet and say, this is a bunch of cool stuff you can do. So I was looking through my automations this morning as to get inspiration for this and see kind of what I wanted to chat about. But I know you also do a timeline, what you said, the week of. So you could do that as well. And somebody actually did ask about that in one of our posts before this day, which was kind of automating your timeline of events for something like a wedding to your team members. So you can definitely do that. As long as you have that data in the schedule itself and on the job, and any other important data you want them to know about, you can totally automate an email to go to them like a few days before the wedding or a week before. I do that actually for second shooters, just reminding them of the event a week before I send it, I think. So yeah, wedding second shooter confirmation email after they get assigned to it, but then also a week before I remind them, and that email for me just pulls in the basics. It pulls in like, this is a location for ceremony, this is a location for reception. I'm gonna fill you in with a lot more detail later. But that's just like a very essential, like, hey, don't forget you're working for me in a week. But then, like you said, you can also automate like the full schedule, pull in tons more detail if you want the week of. I don't automate that. I just have it as part of my workflow, and because I have to choose the appropriate email template to draft, and I have a bunch of those right now, the way I have them set up. So I don't personally automate that, but you could.
But you could.
Yeah, if your schedule is always pretty much the same, you can do that. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. I mean, I have so many.
I mean, this is impressive.
I draft like a.
How many years have you been using Tave before working for them? And
I've been using Tave since 2014, I think.
So it's been a while.
14 or 13. I've only been in business since like 2013, so that probably makes sense. Yeah, probably 13 or 14. And I've now been working for Tave for 3 years. So yeah, I've been in and out of my account every day.
I mean, I live off of this.
Yeah.
Like when people ask, how do you balance, that question that I kind of always hate, how do you balance work and life? Well, I balance work and life with my paper planner and Tave.
Good systems, yeah.
I open Tave up every single morning. It is open in a tab on my computer all day, every day. There's not an hour that goes by that I'm not dipping in and out of it for something. And the more I use it and the more I automate and the more I add to my workflow for every wedding now, it's huge. But tell me the last time I've missed anything.
Yeah.
It's been never. It's either automated or it's sitting there waiting for me to do it or approve it. And if I don't approve it, it turns red and it makes me angry.
Yeah.
And this is how I stay on top of everything. No whiteboards, no apps on my phone. This sitting open in a browser telling me what to do every day.
Yeah, I tell everybody when it comes to like
you should have
getting
pulled a wedding
around
yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a little late.
I'm just saying FYI.
I actually have 2 weddings I'm behind on culling, but yeah, like looking at my dashboard, which again, I'm at my computer pretty much throughout the whole day working for Tave, but I always have my own account up in one of my browsers at all times. It's the first thing I check in the morning. Because my goal is like this is what is telling me what I need to work on. So my upcoming tasks, as well as those tiles at the top that we talked about earlier in the Right Now widget, those govern what I'm doing that day. They tell me what's pressing, they tell me what new stuff has come in, if I have a contract I need to sign, if I have an order that's past due, if I have any shoots or events today, like I have this tile here telling me. Those are so valuable, and the tasks are honestly what brought me to Tave years ago. Was I needed something that had all of my things that I need to do in one place and that dynamically update for me and keep me on top of like 30 weddings and a bunch of portrait sessions per year. So this is what I tell everybody: you're going to get behind on things if you don't stay on top of, like, if you don't look at this once a day at least and just kind of check things off that you've done or change their due dates, or, you know, just keep an eye on what you need to be doing, because there's so many times where people, their dashboard is just like full of like 300 late tasks and
how
10 tiles are up there, and I get like anxiety looking at it. But usually people get to a point where if they get that behind, that's when they get overwhelmed and then just stop looking at it. And that's where you're going to find
it's like how my husband has 45,000 unread emails.
Oh, no.
I can't.
No, I can't do that. So you got to stay on top of it. But automations will help because they'll lessen the tasks that you have to physically do yourself, because Tave's doing them for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'll just keep you on top of everything. It's so awesome. One thing I actually didn't mention before we get into any like final questions or anything, so if anybody does have any final questions, definitely submit them. But the one thing I realized I didn't mention about automations in general is you can see in your list of automations, one thing to know is definitely you can turn them on or off right from this screen. So you can enable or disable right from here. Another good thing to know is you can see the history here. So if you ever have an automation that you're like, oh wait, this was supposed to go out today, I think, or this should have run, and why didn't it run? You can see the last time it's run for you next to it, but you can also click on history and actually see the history of the last times it's run, or it's been triggered but didn't run for one or more reasons because something failed. So for example here, I haven't had a small wedding, what I call a small wedding, in a while, so that's why there's a whole bunch of skips here. But you can see here at all times the last 100 most recent executions, and you can see why, you know, something may have skipped. So in this case, I can see exactly what condition maybe wasn't met, and that's why when this task was checked off, why it didn't run, and it's because it doesn't match the task that this automation is looking for. So you can see all of those history. So every time something happens, something that's observable in an automation, Tave skims your account and sees if there's a match, and it documents that history in there. So I always tell people, definitely check out the execution history before reaching out to us, because you may even see something in there that you're like, oh, duh, that's why that didn't run, or helps tell you what may be set up wrong in the automation if you thought it should have run. So that'll help you pinpoint which task or which condition may be done wrong, or what was different about that job that made it not run, or something like that. So just a little tip, I didn't mention that earlier, definitely check the history. And like we said earlier, if you have any automations or things that you think you would like to automate, you're not sure if it's possible. And
sometimes it's not an automation that's what people need.
Yeah.
They need something else entirely. It needs to be a workflow line item, or it needs to be solved in a different way.
Yeah, and sometimes if it's something that can't be done in an automation, there's often other workarounds with sidebar reports and those little tiles up at the top. There's cool ways to like remind yourself of things that way, which I do a lot instead of using an automation, because I don't need it to be automated.
Yeah, I thought I needed to automate reminding myself when I need to staff an event.
Yeah.
But then I really just made a custom sidebar report that showed what weddings need what staff.
Yep. And then you can show a tile if there's any.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So we go over that in the sidebar reports, the custom reports video.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I always tell people, if there's something you think you want an automation for, you're not sure how to do it, of course, number one, look at our support articles, because we do have a lot of good stuff there. But then, of course, if you need help or want a second set of eyes looking at something that you've taken a stab at, definitely shoot us a support message from your account help menu, and we can take a look. And that's part of my job, and I'm happy to help people make things more powerful and exciting. But yeah, are there any other questions?
I mean, everyone is basically still stuck back in the Instagram thing.
Cool. Good. No, I'm happy.
Let's see. Oh, we have 2 questions, and they're very random.
Okay.
When an order comes in from, say, ShootProof, do we have to select a tax to apply to it?
You do. That's the only thing you have to do. So if you have the ShootProof integration set up, it will come in for you automatically, and you'll see a tile on your dashboard for orders to import. When you pull that in, the only thing you do have to set, just because they're not directly linked, the tax rates and groups that you have in Tave and the tax setup in ShootProof, they're just not connected currently. You do need to, when it comes in, you need to tell Tave which taxes are applied or applicable to that order before hitting save, and adding it to the right job.
Right. Let's see. And next and last question, are there currently any programs that link to Tave for client scheduling appointments? We were literally talking about that
talking about that
earlier,
this morning.
That's something that people want that is not anything
It's like the number one request, which I get it. Definitely for some industries and for some types of meetings and sessions, you may want people to be able to see your availability, like engagement sessions maybe and consultations. I think maybe the only areas that I would probably use them in my own business. But currently, we don't directly integrate with any service that does that. We definitely highly recommend Acuity scheduling.
Yeah.
We actually use that for our own support session scheduling. So we love Acuity.
I like Acuity.
It's pretty advanced.
Things, yeah.
And you can subscribe to that feed in Tave. So I've done that for my Tave support sessions. I actually subscribe to my Acuity calendar in Tave, so I can see that in my calendar and be alerted when I have those events coming up. But if you want them to turn into Tave event types, currently there isn't a way to sync them like that. We are hoping to bring that functionality directly in Tave, so you won't need Acuity or Calendly or any of those.
Custom reports.
Yeah, maybe some additional reports. But yeah,
I just like to say things like that on air so that there's actual record.
There's a record. Yeah. But yeah, no, definitely, the online scheduling right now, we don't have any direct link with any service.
But people.
Although actually, I kind of take that back.
Ooh.
It's not direct, but you can do, if you check in the Facebook user group, there are some people that have used Zapier with Acuity for things like creating leads, where people can look through your Acuity schedule and get on your schedule or kind of inquire about something
with a specific
through there, and they can see your availability,
okay.
So they can see if you're available for their wedding before even inquiring, things like that. So there are workarounds there with Zapier to trigger a new lead or something like that in Tave. But beyond that, there isn't a direct link currently.
Well, I am feeling pretty good. We reached the end of the questions. We talked about automations for about 3 hours, which is pretty much what we thought we were going to do.
Yeah.
There's no way we would have done this on day one.
No.
But now, if you're watching this live, we're going to tack this on to the end of our ultimate Tave setup guide, so that you're going to have, I think it's going to end up something like 8-9 hours of
I think there was
content
6
on how to set it up.
I think there was 6 in the first.
Yeah.
So about 9 hours of learning.
But honestly, if you start it from the very beginning and you watch it all the way to now, you know everything that you need to know, and in the proper order to get set up and running. And I'm not kidding. I've tried, if there is a studio management software out there, for the most part, I've tried it. I landed on Tave, 18 months ago now? Somewhere around about there.
It's been less than 2
And
years.
Has honestly been the single biggest resource that has helped my business succeed. Tave and Good Gallery. Those two together have been the biggest influences in the past 10 years of my business. So if you are thinking about it, you should cut it out and just go for it.
Yes.
And there are resources to help you. If you are stuck and you're thinking, I'm using another studio management software, or I've never started and I don't know how to do this and I don't have time to do it and I really hate this, there are resources. There are people out there that will help you get set up, bring in current clients, set up your price lists for you so you're not stranded out there in the dark. Tave has a very robust users group on Facebook. I highly suggest you go over and join. It's really pretty amazing. It's very supportive and very collaborative, so we really like it over there. And as always, you guys are there. You are a customer service click away.
Yeah, definitely. At any time in your account, you can shoot us a support message right from the help menu, or even from the settings page as well. There is an option to message us. So that's always the best way to shoot us a message if you have any troubles with automations or anything else in your account.
If you do something that you think is smart and it's not, I wouldn't know what that's like at all.
Yeah, so that's the best way to reach us. And we can take a look at what you're working with and give you some advice and help you free up some time to hopefully do other
to improve
good
your
things.
business and live your life.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for sitting with us for well over a full workday of Tave information. And now go forth and automate.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.